Cumulatively across everything I am associated with, we're in 9 figures, 100 million plus. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with successful people that hate their lives too. It doesn't always overlap where the more jacked you are or the more successful you are equals happy. You could live a very mediocre life and have a company that is 9 figures. Dude, if you pull this up, you will find some wild.
So Derek from More Plates, More Dates, thank you so much for coming on the Iced Coffee Hour podcast. Means a lot.
No, thanks
really
for having
appreciate
me, guys.
Coming all the way from Canada too. You're honored.
You were just in Austin shooting your 3rd ever podcast with Joe Rogan. How nervous are you before going on Joe's podcast?
The first time when you have no idea what to expect, it's pretty nerve-wracking because you don't know how elaborate the setup is, if there's, some sort of scripted questions that they have teed up for you, like how it's going to go. And it's very, very chill, nonchalant, kind of just bros talking. And in the studio, it's literally kind of like this. It's just him and Jamie and nobody else.
There's no one else.
That's so cool.
I think that, the more, low key you can do it, the better. With Joe, it's like, obviously he's super easy to speak with. And I don't know, like we get along well. So I would, anytime he wants to have me on, like I'd love to be on. So
that's amazing. Okay. So I have a question just on over optimizing. Because I see a lot of people and they always suggest things in like a very dogmatic way. Like you need to optimize your testosterone regulation, your sleep, your nutrition, your diet, your meditation, supplements, hydration, no FAP. You have this guy, Bryan Johnson, that made an entire career out of optimizing basically every single thing that you can imagine for longevity's sake. Yeah. He says he's going to live till he's like 150 or whatever his number.
Does he concretely state
Well, no, he says he's like decreased aging by like 20 years.
Or he's able to slow it down considerably.
Like,
so it's like...
Now, when I look at him, obviously, I wonder the validity of that statement, but who am I to say? I'm not
Why
the
do you
smart.
wonder, though?
Why do I wonder?
Like, what is it about it that makes you skeptical?
Like when I think of just a healthy person, I would say that is not the profile that I generally imagine. He just looks really, really pale. I would say,
Jack, you can't say that, Jack.
It's like the first thing that comes to mind. And we're all thinking it. Anyways, is there a point in optimizing too much?
Yeah, I think a lot of the thing though is a lot of the low hanging fruit stuff when you dump it into lifestyle, diet, training, sleep. Like you could easily subcategorize it into just a few things, but then within that you can get so hyper granular where it's like infinite amount of optimization possible. So I could say that, there are 5 things that do 90+%. And within that was just defining what is the actual thing that defines a good training regimen or a good sleep regimen or whatever. And he definitely takes it to the, absolute extreme that is to the point where you wouldn't even be able to discern if what he is doing in some capacities is more harmful than helpful, in my opinion. Because some of the stuff he does is like counterintuitive. Like he diets so aggressively that it shuts down his testosterone to some extent. So now he has exogenous testosterone he applies to make up for the lost hormones that he's not producing because he's in literal malnutrition state. So like that's kind of paradoxical and not really like, is that optimization at that point, or are you just biohacking yourself to be jacked while also depriving the shit of yourself of nutrients? When you add in 3 experimental drugs and then you're already on 72 other things and then you're also trying something new with this, like trying to determine what was the thing that changed and how it influenced its cross interactions with the other stuff you're already on, it's kind of hard to know for certain. Like just the other day, he was talking about how he's adding oral minoxidil into his regimen, which is like a really outdated antihypertensive medication, which is no longer used almost ever and has a black box warning, meaning it's like the most prone to potentially lethal side effects. And it was repurposed as a topical for hair loss when they found out that when people were taking it, they were growing hair everywhere. So these people were using this blood pressure medication and just growing body hair and hair on their head. And they were like, if we repurpose this for a topical and you put it on your head, can you get the same effect? Turns out you can with less side effects and you keep it somewhat localized. So some people, though, to take it to the extreme, to get the maximum effect, they will take the old, like really outdated oral medication, which is more effective, but also proportionally more side effect ridden.
So is that just to keep the hair on his head? So
because a lot of
oral minoxidil?
A lot of the stuff that he does too is not just about objective, like health metrics. It's
Like
also
longevity.
about vanity.
Yeah, I was
cosmetic.
wondering about like being so low body fat. Is that healthy to be in that
Yeah.
state all the time? He looks great, but is that optimal to living to 150?
Yeah, so that's the thing too, is what is the goal, and are you optimizing for that goal anyway? Because a lot of what he does is not necessarily in the extreme of longevity. It's also very intertwined with, I want to look good and be healthy simultaneously, which is fine. But it's like, again, some of these treatments are not necessarily like pro longevity. Like, try to argue that oral minoxidil will help you live to 150. It's probably not. So,
You know what? Maybe he's able to get more attention looking the way he does.
Yeah, and then
with
that-
the six-pack abs. Like, look how healthy I am.
and then indirectly, it's like,
Yeah.
if you look good and you look younger, do you behave younger and have some sort of like health benefit?
That's a good point.
Like, I think there is literature on that does show that that is the case. If you look better, you will actually like be healthier.
Yeah. How much of
some
that do you think
extent.
is just genetics in terms of how long you're going to live? Because it seems like there are these communities in like Europe and Japan where the people live into their early hundreds, and it seems pretty common. And maybe that could be diet, or being stress free or socializing more. But how much of that do you think is genetic?
A lot of it. So, like, there are people
Yeah.
you could find who have all of the red flags of what you shouldn't do and will still outlive you, even if you tried everything Bryan Johnson does. With that said, you can obviously have your best shot at extending whatever it is that you're working with. You have a certain hand of cards you're dealt, and what you do with that is dependent on all of the factors that you impose upon yourself: lifestyle, diet, etc. And yeah, I think a lot of stuff could extend lifespan fairly significantly. Like, when it comes to cardiovascular disease, it's like the number one killer of people in the States right now, like even more so than cancer. And that is super preventable if you know what to look for in blood work and know how to get, if you have a high quality doctor overseeing your care. Some of the stuff under that, though, like cancer and whatnot, like some of the stuff is so nebulous to know if you're actually going to be fine, when you're going to get it, how you're going to get it, how to avoid it. All you can do is kind of optimize what you can and, hope it's impactful on number of years. But in general, the thing that should be more focused on, I think, is the quality of life over quantity, because there are certain things you could do to extend lifespan that aren't necessarily like making life fun or worth living, because you could diet yourself into like a state of metabolic nothingness almost and be like for example, a tiny old woman might outlive a really jacked big dude because she's like doesn't really require that much to sustain herself and has very little risk factors from different aspects. I don't know, doesn't have a lot to impose on her body demands wise. Her organs don't need to support like way more calories or what have you. But is that like a life you want to live, where you're depriving yourself of food constantly, doing these like 3-day fasts? I'm not saying they don't have validity. It's just like, it's very speculative what this stuff does at the end of the day and how much it extends lifespan. All you can really do is things that we know work and are worth doing, like having a good diet, exercise, sleep. And I would say assessing your hormones, biomarkers, et cetera, to make sure stuff is at least as optimal as it could be. And then if you want to address it further and go some degree in the biohacking kind of optimization realm by manually intervening, then, that's a judgment to make once you've kind of like assessed things from an educated angle.
So actionable things for the viewer, let's just say on average, it's an 18 to 35-year-old man. What 5 or so things would you recommend that do 90% of you get 90% of the results of all optimization?
Sleeping 8 hours a night. And obviously you could get granular around that and how you would optimize that, but let's just put the bucket of like, sleep.
Make it simple. Yeah.
Assuming it's good. And then we have resistance training is like very overlooked in terms of its importance, in my opinion. Like having muscle and bone integrity, especially as you get into older age, is like of critical importance. I would say just basic moving your body. So getting 10,000 steps a day, I think is a pretty like concrete, good cookie cutter recommendation for most people. And I like the idea of having like a goal that you can actually know you reached and feel good about you achieved something, rather than some nebulous, just like move around a lot. Because that's often what you hear is move your body. It's like, okay, well, some people need a step tracker or whatever to see that they're actually hitting a number that gives them that feedback. I did good today. And I know that I kind of hit my basis for what I need to be doing. So I would say the resistance training, steps, sleep. From a diet perspective, not overeating, the only way you would really dictate if that's actually happening, if you're totally unaware of how to go about tracking your macronutrients, is just looking at the scale. If you're eating and it is going up on a regular basis, like you're eating too much, and you need to lower your portions and or look at the quality of your food and kind of determine, is there, am I eating ultra processed, like calorie dense, hyper palatable foods, and maybe I should reel back and assess what I'm eating. Why is it that I'm overweight right now? And often, like, you can't out-train a bad diet, or if you do, it's very difficult to, and most won't. Very rare circumstances do I find people who are training so much that they could eat whatever. It exists, but they're outliers. In general, people need to just look at what they're eating and probably, at least for a month or two, meticulously track like every calorie that enters their mouth. And if you're not gaining weight on average on a weekly basis, then you're either at maintenance calories, or if you're losing weight, you're in a deficit. And as long as you are at a healthy body composition, you're not gaining weight, unless your goal is to gain muscle, then, I think calorie energy balance in general is kind of like the fourth bucket. I would say fifth is like getting diagnostics to actually assess that what you're doing is moving you in the right direction too. Because there are certain genetic predispositions that no matter what you do, lifestyle, diet, etc., you might be overlooking some significant problem that exists within your ancestral, like your parents, grandparents, whatever, that is passed on to you that goes overlooked, and that you might want to, get diagnostic oversight in order to make sure not only that the things you're doing on a regular basis are providing actionable feedback, that your, levels on all metrics are getting better and looking optimal for sustaining health and quality of life, but also that you don't have some weird outlying genetic predisposition that you're totally unaware of that would have killed you in 15 years.
Well, I guess since we're on the topic of longevity, did you know that 50% of businesses fail in the first 5 years?
Well, thanks to today's sponsor, Shopify, you'll have all of the tools to ensure that longevity is the only option.
For those unaware, Shopify is the global e-commerce platform that's already transformed millions of businesses worldwide. For example, Shopify has an endless list of integrations, third-party apps, and flexible templates to customize your online store exactly the way you want it. And what sets Shopify apart from their competitors is their ability to turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout that's 36% better than leading e-commerce platforms.
And fun fact, Shopify actually powers 10% of all e-commerce in the United States, supporting brands like Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen in over 175 countries.
In fact, my coffee company, BankrollCoffee.com, which you could go there right now to check it out and see.
Not a plug for them.
But you can see what Shopify is doing. We've used Shopify for the last 3 years, and we use them because they were the best by far, and they've been fantastic. Plus, they have an award-winning support team to be able to help you any step of the way.
So sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ICH. That's shopify.com/ICH to grow your business no matter what stage you're in.
Shopify.com/ICH, all lowercase, for a $1 a month trial period.
Thank you so much, Shopify, and back to the episode.
Does it matter what you eat as long as the calories add up to a certain amount? Like eating 1,500 calories worth of Oreos versus, 1,500 calories of steak. Does it matter if the calories are the same?
For sure. Yeah, like the quality of food. At the end of the day, if you're in a deficit and eating less than you're expending from a caloric standpoint, you will lose weight, but the proportion of weight lost will be suboptimal if you're eating just Oreos to achieve that. So even if you're training perfectly, you're doing your cardio, and you're eating 1,500 calories of just McDonald's versus high quality red meat, complex carbs, like whatever, the difference in your body composition at the end of it will be pretty significant, in that you will have more muscle, you will have better health markers, you'll feel better. Like there's a clear difference in terms of the outcome, although you could still, scientifically, you will lose weight. It's just impossible to not if you're in a deficit of energy. But a lot of systems in your body will be performing worse if you are eating the
Got it. And how do you optimize your sleep? I've seen some people say that you're supposed to do everything completely blacked out, or you're supposed to have a light next to you that slowly wakes you up. I found that for myself, I do best with natural sunlight in the morning. Like, despite what everyone says, I like seeing the sun come up, and I find that I sleep better waking up somewhat naturally.
What time do you wake up, though?
I would say about 8, maybe 7, the earliest.
And the sun is up at what time here?
I would say 5:30, 6, give or take.
So I guess it depends on how your sleep tracks with the sun, because it's like, let's just say you're trying to wake up 4 hours after it comes up. Having that light entering your room and disrupting your sleep might not be ideal, versus if you're actually waking up with it. I would say that's pretty optimal. If you could go to sleep as it's, when it's dark, and then waking up with it, you're pretty much replicating what is an ideal circadian rhythm. A lot of people don't have the luxury of that. They work shift work, like whatever it is, in which case you have to get a little bit more, I don't know, granular on what you're doing. And yeah, I think blackout blinds are great, depending on the person, because it's also pretty hard to get up when it's blacked out in the room too. And that's where like the natural light can be helpful. Yeah. I would love, and it's obviously unreasonable to ever suggest this to anyone, but having a device that would blackout blinds that open slowly at like a certain time of day, like based on when the sun is coming up, or, you know, when you actually want to wake up. Because even right now, a lot of people, if you have a blacked out room, me included, I have to still have certain tactics sometimes to make sure I don't just lie there. Because when you wake up,
I know.
If you don't have that natural light cueing you to be getting
Does that
up,
not exist? Something that just opens the shades?
Yeah,
I've
you
seen
could
those
get
lights
an automatic electronic something where you just push a button.
Yeah.
That's highly
you want it
expensive.
to. You want it to adjust every day though, based on the sun. Like if the
a
sun,
lot of people would argue just go to bed on time, but it's like it's just not realistic for everyone, obviously.
right?
It's insane that I'm saying this because it sounds so lazy, but I'll just be honest. I was thinking about buying some wood or a super long extendable stick because my blinds are probably 9 feet away from my bed. Where as soon as I wake up, I just whoosh, you know, and I just like open it up a little bit, because getting out of the bed when it is pitch black in your room,
it sucks.
even if it's 9 a.m., it's just harder.
Yeah, that's the opposite of lazy. That's like intuitive shit right there.
But yeah.
Getting to bed, I think the timing of it is very important. So your body adapts to cues, especially when you're eating or exposure to sunlight. So if you go to bed at 10 every day, trying to go to bed at the same time every day and trying to wake up around the same time every day and ingraining this rhythm in your brain is like one of the most important things. I would say avoiding eating as close to bed as possible, ideally, would be worthwhile as well. So some people, they will eat, you know, midnight, you know, a late night snack or whatever, or have a lot of their calories right before sleeping. And your metabolism will be trying to essentially use up that food when you are in bed and trying to fall asleep. And when you're trying to fall asleep, to get into sleep, you need to lower your body temperature a certain amount. And if you are ingesting a bunch of calories and requiring your body to then like fire up metabolic processes to actually use it up, like that's a heat generating process. So you are actually impeding your ability to fall asleep when you're eating.
But then why is late night eating so popular?
Willpower is diminished to nothingness, and it's like access.
It's just, it does feel really good to eat a big meal and then just go to bed afterwards.
Depending,
it's
on the
hard
person.
for me to sleep when I eat before bed. Yeah, I actually
Something
cut off my
about
eating.
it,
I've just
man.
noticed it as a pattern in my life. It's extremely hard to fall asleep.
Like there's definitely a individual component to it, because like, for example, I wouldn't suggest going to bed super hungry either, because then maybe you're too hungry to get, you know, stay asleep. Some people are different, and that's where you kind of have to play around with it. I'm not suggesting that everyone should do this, but in general, if you're eating the majority of your calories too close to bed, it will be harder to get into deep sleep and stay asleep. So I would just be mindful of that. A lot of people I know try to stop eating like at least 2 to 3 hours out.
I want to get onto the story and how you acquired all of this knowledge, and then how you leverage this knowledge to build a $100 million plus business, which you've talked about on other podcasts as well. But before we get into that, there's one other random question that I have to ask, which is Andrew Tate says, if you're depressed, you get a 6-pack and then come back to me and tell me if you're still depressed. We've talked about optimizing all of these different facets of your life. What are the actual results of optimizing these things aside from just vanity? Does it actually make a significant impact on your quality of life and internal metrics?
Yeah, like being lean is unquestionably good for health. Obviously, that can be taken to the extreme with guys like Bryan Johnson, who calorie deprive themselves so aggressively that they then need to use exogenous hormones to maintain decent function. And a lot of bodybuilders do that too, self-admittedly. They'll get shredded and use exogenous steroids in order to maintain like high quality life, you know, strength in the gym, muscle tissue, to not have it deteriorate as they diet down. And they'll be at, you know, like single digit body fat percentage and be shredded walking around and still functioning well, because they're literally shooting the hormones into themselves. So when you're doing it naturally, though, like there is a Goldilocks zone whereby if you're too fat, like it's not conducive to optimal health. And if you're too lean, it's also not conducive to optimal health. And having a good happy medium is like unquestionably good in all metrics of health, essentially.
And mental health as well.
Yeah, for sure. And especially like the impact it has on brain fog too, eating the diet that is conducive to like a lean body composition and you being metabolically flexible and using energy efficiently for actual recovery of tissue that is metabolically active rather than just like having your blood sugar stay elevated and then you're sitting in your chair and not actually using it up for anything. You get into these roller coasters of brain fog, and a lot of people who are more metabolically fit don't experience that.
How did you learn all of this? How do you get into this?
Probably the same way anyone in their niche gets really deep. So like in your niche, it just, you get enthralled in it because it interests you to no end. So you just will sit there and just assimilate information all day. Even if you weren't making content about it, you probably were interested in it to begin with. And that's kind of like, I think where the best content creators come from are people who would have done it anyways. Mm-hmm. I'm not suggesting that you need to do that necessarily, but like for me, from being a teenager, I've been ingesting information from wherever I can to try and get as knowledgeable as I can about anything that interests me. And I'm just the type of person that will sit there on the computer and just bury myself in papers and asking people anything I need to learn what I can. And just always information seeking. I just really, mentally get rewarded from learning stuff I care about.
Do you know why you're so interested in this specific field?
I think because it affects like broad spectrum performance. It's not just performance in the gym or in sports. It's also mentally, and it's super overlapping with entrepreneurial endeavors as well. So having a mentally dialed cognitive state is obviously incredibly conducive to high quality work, business acumen, performance in your businesses, et cetera. Like it all is overlapping, and not just about health, but also about performance, trying to optimize all angles of that in order to not only stave off disease, maximize my performance, but also be able to impart that information to friends and family who otherwise are like blindly going through the medical system. Something that is what I'm passionate about and kind of led me down the telemedicine route. Because in Canada, especially, you're kind of just told to go home if you ask for anything and you're not like literally dying in front of them.
So what I find really interesting is I have a lot of friends that like have gone through medical school. I've met quite a few different doctors and stuff like that. And I like to ask what they teach them in medical school. And a lot of the times it's not natural and organic things that will fix these issues that I feel like intuitively could be fixed. Like a lot of mental illnesses is fixed by administering pills and medication and stuff like that, where I feel like if we tried some more like organic routes first, you'd probably yield better or at least more like foundational results.
Perhaps a lot of, I think depression is the one that's brought up a lot. Perhaps there's for some people, it's an underlying condition of, in the brain. But for others, it could be their environmental conditions or their situation that's really contributing to that. So fixing whatever that issue is could solve their, depression versus medication.
Oh, for sure. Like I know some of the most successful people, I'm sure you guys are very familiar with successful people that hate their lives too. Like it doesn't always overlap where, the more jacked you are or the more successful you are equals happy. And oftentimes there's like a hedonic treadmill where these people get happy and then they realize that wasn't what made them happy. And then they have this internal crisis about what actually is the meaning of life. And then they get sent down this rabbit hole and they're less happy than somebody who's, just living a average life objectively. So, like a lot of this stuff can be fixed naturally. If they are a general practitioner, they may only get a certain amount of time with exposure to knowledge about hormones or to what have you. And that could be to the detriment of being the person you want to defer to when you're trying to learn about a specific subsystem of the body. So if I want to learn about how hormones work or, reproductive health or testosterone, like I don't necessarily want to talk to my family doc. I might want to talk to an endocrinologist. And that's why there's specialties where they lean into things heavier. But even then, oftentimes you are subject to whatever the current curriculum / literature says, which might be outdated for all we know. So, and oftentimes you'll see, people going to multiple specialists and getting told things that even as a just person who consumes YouTube on a regular basis, you might be like, that sounds wrong. I've heard, totally contradictory advice from multiple people now. I'm not saying use YouTube for your advice over an endocrinologist, obviously, but there's certainly some element of not every doctor knows everything. And there are amazing doctors that do great things, but just because you're credentialed, it doesn't equal, the most knowledgeable always. So, and yeah, a lot of stuff can be fixed naturally.
But you know what? Before we go into that, we have some really exciting news that we're now filming our episodes in 4K. This one is not in 4K, but the future episodes are all in 4K. The downside, though, is that it's very expensive to do. We need a lot of special equipment. But what's most remarkable is that we were able to grow to almost 900,000 subscribers without ever doing 4K. You don't need crazy equipment if you want to grow on YouTube, and our sponsor, StreamYard, is there to help.
StreamYard is a recording and live streaming software that allows you to create high-quality content with just the click of a button.
All you need is a camera and an internet connection, and you'll be able to stream right from your computer across multiple social media platforms at the same time, like YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn.
And that feature in and of itself makes StreamYard extremely worth it, because what do you always say about being on every platform?
You're
Graham?
leaving money on the table if you're not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Anyways, guys, if you want to be on every single platform, which is super important, you want to create high quality content with just the click of a button for free. They offer a free package with the link down below. It would mean so much to us. StreamYard also supported us all the way through 2023, and they're supporting us all the way through 2024. So it would mean so much if you guys just click that link down below in the description. Try it out, StreamYard. It's definitely worth it. Thank you so much, StreamYard, and back to the episode.
When did you start working out?
Probably when I was 17-ish. I was the last person in my friend group to start, and I played basketball. I was like a skinny runt who didn't really care about working out at all.
Yeah.
Just what was the point? It didn't really help me shoot 3-pointers, so didn't really care. And then my friends just got really into it and peer pressured me into it, essentially, because it kind of got stupid being there and hanging out with them when they're bench pressing and whatever, and I'm just standing there doing nothing. So I might as well join. Then I made some progress relatively quickly, and then I was like, damn, like this is cool. I'm actually seeing visual changes happening, and then it's called getting the iron bug. You get bit by it.
Yeah.
So I kind of got bit by the iron bug, and then it definitely superseded my interest in basketball, to where I just kind of leaned into that and then continued thereafter.
Was there a correlation with gaining muscle and attention from women? Or was it your confidence that was affected by that actually caused better or more attention from women?
The confidence component is definitely a huge variable that most people overlook. And actually, I would say that for the first few years, it was probably worse because I did a lot of like dirty bulking. I'm sure you guys have heard of dirty bulking.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you just eat anything because you think that gaining weight equals good, even at the expense of literally becoming fat. So I gained like 60 pounds, I think.
60 pounds?
Yeah.
In how long?
I think my first 3 months, I gained 40 to 50.
That's a lot. How is that even possible?
Insane.
It's possible. Trust me.
You were eating like 9,000 calories a day?
Yeah,
How
I was
much?
just, the thing is a lot of
Yeah.
people don't actually count. And when you start counting to the calorie, a lot of times you realize you weren't ingesting as much as you thought, or the opposite for certain obese people that overestimate or whatever. Or underestimate. So for me, I was counting meticulously and also slamming like weight gainer shakes and eating really garbage food, like anything I could do, even to the extent that if I threw up, I would be like, oh fuck, I gotta go eat again to make up for that. Yeah. It got intense. So that wasn't normal.
Yeah.
But that was
So how did you dial back after that?
Well, eventually enough people tell you that are close to you and care about you that you're getting fat, and you should probably tone it back a bit. And, the response at the time is like, you don't understand dirty bulking. This is how you do it.
So they're just
when
telling
was
you
the
you're
cut coming?
fat? Yeah.
It came probably after the first year-ish. I did like a little bit of a diet down. I think I bulked up again thereafter, and then I dieted again. It took probably like 2 or 3 cycles of bulking and cutting, with the next bulks not being as aggressive as the first, before I kind of actually got to a body composition that looked like, okay, you're actually a guy who goes to the gym and works out. So after that point, though, I had enough muscle where even when I bulked up a bit, I was a lot more cognizant about how far I would take it. And also you have enough muscle tissue underneath that you don't look as fat, because you actually have the muscle in conjunction with the fat that you've gained to kind of there are a lot of people with 6-packs that are bodybuilders that are still holding quite a bit of body fat, but they have so much muscle that it kind of like they still look vascular.
So at what point, though, did that help you with women?
A few years in, I probably didn't even talk to women for the first 2 years I was in the gym too. So I don't even know if you could count it as a fair comparison. But after I got actually lean for the first time, I started to kind of go out of my comfort zone more and had the confidence to go up to chicks and talk to them and strike up conversations in my university, walking around. And there was definitely times though where I had as good or more success when I was objectively like perhaps a bit overweight too. So a lot of it is just how you're speaking, how confident you are, how your interaction goes, if there's chemistry, stuff like that. So some people definitely over-optimize to the degree that they will not even talk to the opposite sex unless they're like cutting. So I don't suggest that.
I've heard about that.
Yeah.
Is that
Like
a thing?
they don't take off their shirt until they're like lean
Yeah.
and
Why?
post-cut.
Is that just motivation to?
Well, you definitely
stick
get
with
body
it?
dysmorphia once you get into this fitness industry, especially where you think that if you don't have a six-pack equals I'm very fat. And
Is that just because you're around people and everyone has a six pack? So if you don't have one, then you feel like
it's not even
you
that you're
have one?
around them physically,
Yeah.
it's that you're looking at them on social media. And this is the norm of expectation in fitness. Like right now, I'm actually relatively untrained. I kind of like changed my priorities a bit in the past couple of years to where I am in the gym far less than I want to be. And I think is optimal, but it was just at the expense of a lot of business stuff that was taking off that I just, at least at the time, unjustifiably justified it was worth not going to the gym as much, which I'm trying to change this next year. But like in that domain, it's kind of like when you get into the fitness industry, you kind of get this assumption that everyone, I don't know, has you have this perception of what is considered good, and it is like very, very skewed to where me now compared to a few years ago, people would be like, you have a dad bod or you look out of shape. It looks like you don't train anymore. It's like to a layman, objectively, that's an insane statement. But to like a fitness industry guy, that actually might be a reasonable answer. It's like, Derek, you look like you don't even fucking train anymore.
Well, that's the thing. It's like if I go on YouTube shorts or Instagram reels or TikTok and stuff like that, the only stuff that gets views and does well are people that are just absolutely shredded.
Sort of.
You disagree.
Yeah, like I don't even take my shirt off really for videos. I don't even do training footage anymore. I used to back in the day, but lately I'm just like a talking head in videos in front of a wall.
But what I'm saying, like, maybe it's just my algorithm, but like if the video genre is fitness, it's usually someone with like, an insane shredded body.
Yeah, but you also, some of the most respected and successful people in the industry are individuals that don't fit the norm of the genetic phenom. Because you'd be surprised, like some people, like Sam Sulik, for example.
Yeah.
He's an outlier, and obviously he's like sauce to hell. But it's not every guy who's that. There are plenty of people way more jacked than him that don't get any attention, and they post videos regularly. Like there's just a certain element that some people are very likable and post content that a lot of people relate to and or just like the person to some significantly greater extent. But there are plenty of bodybuilders that are the most hyper extreme example of jacked, shredded, whatever, who have objectively low followings, and then some that are on the other extreme. Like Chris Bumstead is like the most popular fitness person ever, probably, at least by proportional metrics. Obviously, like Arnold back in the day was huge, but I mean, like sheer engagement wise now, he beats like A-list celebrities. So, and like obviously you could argue, okay, well, he's the best physique, and that it reinforces what I said, but it's like there are guys that will don't even post their physique that are in the industry that still do very, very well too. And
How is Sam so big? He looks like a cloud. He's big.
Oh, like big.
I thought you were asking like popularity wise.
Yeah.
No.
I was like, what do you, a cloud
No,
and his
yeah.
YouTube channel?
Yeah.
Like, how's it? Okay.
No, but he's a massive guy.
Yeah, genetics, steroids, adhering to his diet meticulously and hitting his calorie and protein goals. Like the guy's life is essentially revolved around going to the gym and eating his meals, and his content is entirely essentially dictated by following him do those things. So when it's your job to adhere to it, like I would say it's a bit more likely that you will. And then in addition to that, he's also a genetic phenom in that he hyper responds to what he's doing in terms of hormones.
Is he open about his steroid use?
I don't think he's ever said anything
I've never
about
heard
it.
it.
But
I don't think so. But
I'm
you
sure-
say, but based on your knowledge, you think
1,000,000%. I would bet like my net worth on it. So with
How could you tell?
well, you just said he looks like a clown.
I know, but you objectively, you have this vision that you could say this person is on steroids.
Yeah.
What do you see that a normal person wouldn't?
I don't know how his brother trains, but like, first of all, there's a pretty clear distinction between him and somebody who has very similar genetics, and they both train, and one looks like a amateur level or almost, I don't know, some people would argue that he's like borderline low level pro bodybuilder within a couple of years, and his brother looks like a normal guy still. Maybe his brother just started, and this is an unfair comparison, but at the end of the day, the progression he's made from what looked like a decent natural physique was so rapid that it would be unexplainable to gain that much tissue naturally. Like, it's just physically impossible. So having gone to the gym for a certain amount of time and then to explode and gain 50 pounds of muscle thereafter, it's just not a physiologic thing that could occur. Yeah, I couldn't, that's probably the best explanation. Obviously you could look at him and objectively say this physique is not natural because it is X amount of pounds higher than what most naturals can achieve who are at the highest level of, you know, tested sport or whatever. Like, there's a lot of metrics you could look to, but also it's just easy to see his progress is unnatural.
Do you think Sam has a responsibility to be open about his steroid usage with his platform?
Not really. I don't know. Like, the guy, I think just by existing will encourage hormone use, unfortunately. And then some people will criticize him for that, probably unfairly so, because he's just a guy who makes content and wants to do what he does. And maybe he competes one day, maybe he doesn't, but it's like, I don't think just because you're influential and look great and take shit equals you need to like tell everyone everything. I think you have a duty to not lie to their faces about it probably, but, or to monetize in a way that is leveraging your like fake natural status in order to get rich off of products that are, you know, promising things that are just untrue. But above and beyond that, like, I don't necessarily think he has to sit down and make a video and say, yup, as you guys probably guessed, I'm a natural, and like, here's why you shouldn't do it, and blah, blah, blah. So it's like people got to kind of make their own decisions and take some responsibility. And I'm sure he did the same thing when he sat down. There was one day where Sam Sulek sat down as a natural and looked at probably YouTube videos, dug into some whatever research, maybe asked some friends, like, is it worth it if I do this? Like, what am I trying to get out of it? He had that assessment too, and he was probably inspired by someone else. And should that guy have not been on social media being jacked and sick looking? I don't know. You know, did that guy have a responsibility to tell Sam he would have died if he took gear or something? I don't know. That's kind of a, you know, speculative thing.
So let's talk a little bit about your businesses. You have your clinic and you have your supplement business. I think it's the supplement business does like $100 million or so a year. At least
I didn't say anything.
My first million, they guessed
didn't disagree.
6 to 8 million a month. And you agreed.
Cumulatively across everything I am associated with, we're in what is 9 figures, 100 million plus, right? So that's territory. But I'm not going to get like hyper specific on which businesses do what and whatever.
How do you decide to turn this into a business?
Which one? The like my channel even, or what do you mean?
I guess everything, even the supplements, your channel. Like, how do you decide to monetize your interest in fitness?
By the way, the thing I should preface, which I see a lot of people don't do, is when you say 100 million, no one talks about net numbers.
Yeah, that's right.
And like, let's not like a lot of times I see maybe business owners who are incentivized to actually show how well they're doing because they're part of some entrepreneurial like upsell thing. Like, these numbers are not necessarily like the owner equals like this. You don't keep this money. Like, a lot of it's reinvested to build the businesses. And if you're,
you said 50 to 100 employees as well
per company. Yeah. Like, I just want to add a preface because a lot of people see these big numbers, especially as headlines, and they will very much take and run with that, some unrealistic expectation of how business works. And even if this is a goal you are considering pursuing, like, understand that just these numbers don't mean your take home is some like you could live a very mediocre life and have like a company that is 9 figures, depending on what your goal is with it. So just putting that out there. Yeah. But anyways, the way transitioning into this was a lot about my content and what I would promote or give education about to begin with. So when I started making content about nutrition, supplementation, pharmacology, hormone optimization, like, it was very, very centric around these things to begin with, and oftentimes reviewing other companies that are, you know, at the cutting edge or doing things that I think are bad or good and giving my opinions. Oftentimes I would have affiliate relationships too, where I would have you know, use my affiliate code to get, you know, kickback a commission, support the channel and using this product that I think is the best of this specific industry. And after a while, once you build up enough funds, I'm sure similar to you, you've made some YouTube ad revenue, you've made some affiliate commissions, you've had some sponsorships, and it's like, okay, well, do I want to build equity for this other company now? Or do I want to go like pivot into my own thing? And is the bandwidth allocation of time worthwhile to actually lean into it? Or am I just taking away from my bread and butter? And making that kind of calculation for me, at least, on my 3 main businesses, which is Gorilla Mind, Merrick Telemedicine, and Intelligent Shop. Those 3 things in particular, I feel like I have enough of a expertise in and care enough about personally to lean into as worth my time allocation. So like in particular, the Gorilla Mind company is dietary supplements, typically oriented around sports performance, and energy drinks more recently, nootropics, cognitive enhancement. That's kind of like the main products we offer. And then Merrick Health is the telemedicine diagnostic side of things. Not a traditional TRT clinic. A lot of people title these clinics as TRT clinics, and justifiably so for many of them, but we pride ourselves in being like diagnostic oversight and optimizing health before looking at any of these other things. So that's worth mentioning because I think it's often these companies get lumped into this kind of like narrow, kind of like bit more sketchy territory, but it is a preventative medicine platform. And then third is Intelligent Shop, which is like men's hair loss prevention in particular, and the pharmacology around that is something I've made tons of content on and is something I found very, very interesting. So making products that actually work centered around that. And then also something a lot of people don't know is I used to make fragrance reviews. I am just like a fragrance connoisseur. So I would get girls to rate fragrances, go to university
You
campuses.
get girls to rate fragrances.
Yeah, if you look at some of my old videos, I would walk around university campuses and be like, what do you think of this one compared to this one? Rate it out of 10. Which one's more sexy, et cetera, et cetera.
Do you put like one on one armpit and the other one on the other
No, I
armpit?
spray test strips.
Oh, okay.
What are you doing?
Just kidding. How do you get like a girl to A/B test it, you know? So it's
yeah.
test strips.
Yeah, so it would be like a blind test because they don't see the bottle and it's just on a strip and they would give their opinion. And then these like fragrance battles get endless views. Like there's no time where as somebody who's into fragrances, you will not get views by getting attractive women to rate even fragrances that have existed for decades. I don't know why. It's just like, even me, I
already want to watch it.
Yeah.
I already want to go back.
I'm
and watch
weird.
it.
I like the smell of gasoline and cigarettes. I don't know
So
why.
you would love Fahrenheit by Dior. It is a very polarizing fragrance that only somebody who actually likes what you just said.
It's so random.
Sharpies as well.
Sharpies.
I love Sharpies.
Yeah, I don't
Or
think
the
that's
smell
like-
when you start up a car. It's like that weird sort of like, I don't know, it's a engine smell. Like I like that. It's
Sure.
just-
Yeah, dude. Especially if you're like, if you can pull it off, because again, there's a certain scent that needs to be congruent with like you as a person to really not just come across as why do you smell like a diesel engine or something. But like if you can pull it off, it's a pretty sick scent. But anyway, so you should check that out. But for me, I would made all these reviews and I always thought, you know, it'd be sick if one day I had my own fragrances. So this Intelligent Shop company is kind of like a miscellaneous self-care company, but it's hair loss and hair loss prevention oriented products. It also has skincare and then fragrances that I develop. And I think we're launching our 7th fragrance this month.
So what are some of the crown winners of the fragrance A/B test that you did on college campuses?
Ooh, from existing brands, things that I could recommend. Spice Bomb is a really good one by Victor and Rolf for winter and fall.
That one
months.
consistently won.
Well,
Why just for winter and fall?
certain fragrances have certain notes that are more conducive to be appealing in warmer
Got it.
or colder weather, and some actually stink almost when you're having it in the wrong setting, or might be overwhelming. For example, if you had like a really boozy, sexy smelling fragrance in a date setting would be nice, but in the office would be quite off-putting. So having something oriented for what you're doing, or if you're in the gym, you wouldn't wear like diesel engine fragrance, you know? People are like, what the hell is this guy doing? So like there you would want to smell like you just came out of the shower at most, if anything. So like stuff like that, and having contextual situations that are conducive to like, okay, this one's for this one's for this. That's kind of like what we did. And yeah, some of the best ones off the top of my head. A really good cost-effective one, I would say, if people are looking for a summer fragrance that's pretty guaranteed to be a hit with women, is Nautica Voyage. I think it's the best-selling fragrance on Amazon. It's like $17 for 100 milliliters, and it's quite It's quite good. A lot of people have it, so it's common, but it's reliable on a budget for sure.
What about Dior Savage?
Sauvage.
I feel like I've heard, Jeremy Fragrance.
Dude, that guy is a character.
That's like, I think that's like his favorite.
By the way, he's probably the first one. Maybe he's not the first, but he's one of the first people that inspired like the whole fragrance battle thing. So some of his old videos are not as much as newer videos, but his older ones are like really entertaining, well done. I wish he would go back to that style, but he's been consumed by the TikTok dopamine circuitry, unfortunately. But for that one, Sauvage is like one of the most widely appreciated fragrances, but to the detriment that it's not unique whatsoever. So you will almost certainly smell like some chick's ex-boyfriend if you wear it.
I want to talk about supplements because we had Dr. Mike on the podcast and he said the supplement industry is ripe with scams, basically. Like a lot of supplements are not regulated and you could kind of just like package anything into anything and then sell it as anything.
Yeah, basically. I think a lot of the claims could not be tested, and because they're supplements or they're all natural, there's very little regulation with that. So people are trying to peddle anything because there's such high margins on supplements.
What supplements do you think are actually valid? And like multivitamins, for example. I feel like everyone takes multivitamins. Is that something that people should be incorporating into their diet? And what supplements should people be wary of?
It very much depends on your individual situation, but I want to try and be as general as possible because I could say for a multi, your diet could cover your bases for all I know. A lot of people don't need it, but it's good insurance. Kind of. It's almost like an insurance policy type supplement, which I think is worthwhile for a lot of people, but you don't necessarily need it for optimal health. Fortunately, a lot of the vitamins in it won't actually kind of like accumulate. You'll just urinate out the excess and you kind of know at least you're topping up what you needed, and then the rest would kind of not stick around and cause harm as much. But a lot of people are deficient in vitamin D. It's like pretty damn common nowadays. So I think that's a pretty impactful one.
How do you know if you're deficient in vitamin D? Okay.
So you would check your vitamin D in a blood test and it would show you are either, it's shocking how
Are there symptoms to that though, or would you just not know?
Low testosterone is one of them. Mood, emotional stability, even ability to build muscle in some capacity. Like a lot of stuff is impacted by vitamin D. It's actually a hormone technically. Like it's a steroid hormone, even though it's called a vitamin.
Yeah.
So it's pretty impactful on hormone systems in the body, and being deficient in it. It's like one of the few things that not one of the few things, but one of the most impactful things that if you're deficient, it will markedly decrease your testosterone levels and also your response to that testosterone as well. So people do notice a big difference.
We had Ty Lopez on the podcast, and he has a vitamin D tracker based on the sun and like where he is on the world.
Sure.
So he could go outside and say, here, I only need 10 minutes, but over there, I need an hour in the sun to get that vitamin D.
That sounds super fishy, like almost more fishy than the age clock thing. So I don't know who.
Does it matter if you're getting vitamin D from the sun or like a supplement, or is vitamin D vitamin D?
Like I would say in general, things you can get naturally are better, and they go through an actual regulating framework when you're taking stuff naturally. Like for example, in foods, it'll have like cofactors and different things that support absorption or what have you, that maybe in a supplement getting like a mega dose in one shot might not be the optimal way to do it. When it comes to vitamin D, it's tough because oftentimes the way you ended up deficient to begin with is because your environment is not conducive to a good vitamin D level unless you are intentionally depriving yourself of sunlight, at which point it's kind of like just get outside more. And then if you're still deficient, like, I don't know, like it's also an efficiency thing too. Do I want to sit outside for how long? Versus, like for me, I think a lot of people would benefit from a supplement, but I also think if you can get it naturally, that's probably superior. Although I couldn't point to any literature that shows like an A/B test of it. So yeah, that's a super impactful one. Some other things, magnesium. A lot of people are super deficient in magnesium, and that's super impactful on testosterone levels too, among other things. Zinc, impactful on testosterone. A lot of people are deficient, especially people who are avoiding red meat purposefully. I think beef liver is actually great, as like ironic that the Liver King is like gets a lot of scrutiny. One of the things he did say that is worthwhile, I think, is liver on a regular basis. It's like one of the most choline dense, vitamin A dense, nutrient rich foods in general. It's like nature's multivitamin is what they call it. And I think that product, despite tasting horrendous, if you can stomach it, you only need an ounce every couple days even to hit a lot of your micronutrient needs. And if you think it tastes bad, you could actually take a desiccated like beef liver supplement that could be potentially impactful. So I think that's, interesting to look at for sure. In general, I would say magnesium, vitamin D are two that I see very prominently problematic that will actually notably impact perceived quality of life, sleep, hormone production, among a myriad of other things. So we could go down the rabbit hole as much as you want, but that's like off the top of my head, a couple of things.
How much liver do you eat?
An ounce a day, unless I'm traveling or I just don't want to eat it, which is relatively frequent. So sometimes I'll use a supplement myself sometimes.
So you're traveling right now. You're just in Austin. Now you're here in Vegas. You're here for like a week and a half, you said.
Yep.
How, are you getting liver while you're here?
Yeah, I take 6 capsules a day. I'm good.
Oh, you take capsules?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay, so
yeah, I don't love the taste of it, but I try to eat it when I can.
And what about vegetarianism? One of my very close friends is a vegetarian. He has been for like probably 5 years at this point. Mm-hmm. Would you say that that's a diet that you have to be extremely cautious if you're subscribing to like making sure that you're getting every available nutrient? Do you think that objectively you're probably healthier if you're eating animal product?
I think that you will undoubtedly need to supplement with a few more things than the normal person to hit your nutrient needs, for sure. Like bioavailable B vitamins, having high quality protein, because even if you get a gram of protein on a nutrition label for certain like vegetarian based products is not necessarily the same equivalent impact on protein synthesis rates as like meat derived, like red meat derived. So you need to be a bit more knowledgeable, I would say. I don't think it's impossible to thrive on a vegetarian diet. I just think you need to be a bit more mindful of intake of certain things, like where are you getting your creatine from, where are you getting your carnitine from, where are you getting your bioavailable B vitamins. And sometimes supplementation is warranted to actually be able to adhere to the diet and still get the upside of these vitamins and minerals and whatnot. Like Bryan Johnson, like good luck getting all your stuff without supplements.
Are there any ingredients that people should outright avoid?
Like ultra processed stuff in general is typically going to be, stripped of nutrients and or not that as helpful as the caloric equivalent could be of something that is like, I don't know, natural, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes I try to get my, micronutrients from food when I can, like actually eating liver versus taking it in a supplement. But it kind of depends on your workload too. Like exercise wise, I could say, don't eat as much sugar because you're sedentary, for example. I don't know how much sugar you need to actually support your demands. So it's like if you are somebody who's hardly going to the gym or your workouts are very, very minimally intensive and don't require that much carbohydrate to support them, like maybe you can get away with less and you're just unnecessarily pounding sugar, versus some other guy might literally need to have like shakes around their workout that are filled with, sugar to help support it. And that's like the hyper extreme bodybuilder, but it depends on the person. I'm sure there are a lot of things that I am just not thinking of, though, that are really obvious, low-hanging fruit things to avoid.
Sure. What are your thoughts on fasting?
I think that it is helpful for sustainability of caloric adherence for a lot of people. Even for me personally, like I will wake up and try to not eat for as close to 6 to 8 hours as possible, typically, depending on what I'm doing. If I'm going to the gym that day, maybe it differs, but in general, that approach for me has resulted in an ability to eat the majority of my food later in the day, not so close to bed that it impacts my sleep, because again, you're backlogging your calories. That could be problematic too if you wait until right before bed. But for me, I am most mentally clear when I'm not eating. So if I could just work through hunger and use like minor tactics to kind of push my way through, whether that's coffee, chewing gum sometimes, energy drink here and there.
Yeah, I find the same thing in the morning. If I don't eat and I just have coffee, I find myself being a lot sharper. I could think quicker. As soon as I eat, for whatever reason, even if it's a small something, I slow down. Even if 10%, but still that adds up over the course of a year.
Yeah.
So I've always just done that.
I think the validity of it is it's certainly there for entrepreneurs who want to maintain as sharp of a window of work as possible. When it comes to actual diet outcomes, some people really benefit from it because when they try and split their meals out equally over, I'm going to try the traditional 4 or 5 or even 6 meals a day of equal split everything, they aren't able to feel satisfied off small portions. But then some people, like when you look to literature, you'll often find that it doesn't play out for the population that they're assessing relative to what another guy might find is best for them. So you almost need to experiment a bit. And fortunately with diet, it's not like you're experimenting with a drug necessarily that might screw you up. Like if you try fasting, intermittent fasting for a couple of weeks and you don't like it, you know, like you tried it and it wasn't a big deal, and now you can go back to trying something else or going back to what worked for you the best before. So I think it's worth everyone kind of experimenting, but I've definitely seen some super impactful situations where people went from a traditional, I need to eat right when I wake up, to stretching their eating windows and then getting more work done, being more productive, also being able to eat less overall per day because they feel like a big meal is harder to overeat on than like little small tiny portions. So it depends on the person though, for sure. And it's not necessarily the most ideal for building muscle, having all your protein like shoved into one or two meals.
Got it. What's your recommendation for hair loss?
It depends what stage you're at and how aggressive you want to be, because at the end of the day, unfortunately, there is not really anything that exists that's super impactful that isn't manipulating hormone systems. So when it comes to hair loss prevention, the best thing you can do is get in front of it before it's like cosmetically perceivable. So for me, it was not just accelerated by anabolic steroids when I was younger, but in addition to that, once you actually visually see it in the mirror, like you have 100,000 plus minus whatever, depending on ethnicity or whatever, hair follicles on your head. And visually, if you pull one out, you don't notice any difference in the mirror, obviously. But over time, the miniaturization of these follicles will create a visual perception that becomes cosmetically significant after years of it happening, to where all of a sudden one day, you know, in downlighting or a picture or whatever, you start to notice, like, oh, I can see my scalp and I couldn't see it before. Oh my, like I didn't even notice this was happening. And usually it's like a pretty startling moment when people realize like, oh shit, I actually am prone to hair loss and it's happening. But by then you've already lost like 20, 30+% of your hair. And oftentimes people will give you bad feedback. They'll be like, do you think I'm losing hair? They'll be like, no, it looks fine. It's like, no, dude, you are not fine. It has been happening insidiously this whole time. So a reality check sometimes is that, you know, recession isn't just indicative of, oh, it's what happens to adults and it's supposed to. Yeah. Like there are people like Ronald Reagan who end up at 89, whatever he lived to, and had perfect hairline. Now, I'm not saying he used drugs to do it. He's obviously a genetic freak. But at the end of the day, if you intervene early enough, you could prevent you getting to that point in the time frame that you would have otherwise, if not staved it off entirely. So getting in front of it is so much better than trying to make back ground, because trying to recover dead zones on your scalp especially is like very difficult even with drugs.
So how do you get in front of it? What's your recommendation to someone who's probably in their 20s, maybe starting to notice this? What would you do?
Let's use me for an example here. I brought this up to Graham. He's like, no, you're totally fine. He did what you just said. Obviously, I'll show off my hair, right? So see how like at the corners, see how it's coming up a little bit right here?
Sure.
Coming up a little bit right here. I'm mostly fine. Like I feel like so confident with my hair, but I'm very worried that I will eventually lose it. That for me is like horrifying. And when I did start to notice like in the corners right here, like it coming up a little bit, it was like startling. Like you said, it was shocking.
With you too, if you want to know if you're prone rather than getting on drugs that you might be worried about, you could take good pictures and track over time. And at the first sign of further recession, that could be your sign. Okay, now I start taking it. Because you could still like barely have any more loss and get in front of it before it's so bad that it's obvious. Because for you, like you're pretty good right now. So if it were me and I was like actually averse to taking drugs, I would take a picture and find some landmark on your scalp that you could use as a reference point of recession, and then use that as a gauge for as you get older. Is that, you know, taking progress pictures once a month or something? Is that landmark, are you getting more recessed in that area relative to whatever thing you use as a landmark? Often people will find like a freckle or something you should be able to use to figure it out. And at that point, if you're further receding at some rate that is, you know, noticeable at all, like you know that you're on your way there at, you know, a significant enough pace that it's going to be, okay, well, when I'm 30 plus or however old, you'll be able to see it probably. So do I care enough at that point to get in front of it with drugs knowing that it's happening? Because some people could hypothetically get on drugs and maybe not have needed to. The likelihood is low because most people will end up with some degree of hair loss. It's just to what significance level will be dictated by genetics. So like Ronald Reagan didn't even need to take anything. Almost certainly, almost guarantee he was not on hair loss prevention drugs.
Alex Hormozy.
Dude,
incredible hairline. It like goes like down. It's like he's got like maybe an inch of forehead.
He's got a negative hairline. And you'll be like, what do you do? And he'll be like,
nothing.
He'd be like, Yeah, he'll be like, "What a ridiculous question!" Like, what do you mean? Your hair's perfect, you fuck. So yeah, he doesn't do anything. So that's genetics, for example. But again, with him, you don't actually know that. I don't know what his dad looks like. Maybe one day, all of a sudden, the switch flips, because there are epigenetics that could, at some point, the rate of aging or just the process of aging could trigger certain things that otherwise were not problematic. So you could end up in a state of accelerated androgenic alopecia. I think that's actually a thing where I couldn't point to literature that proves it, but it seems like at some point, some people do experience like acceleration or deceleration of certain things in the body, depending on environmental conditions, what have you. But it's also, I think, genes can turn on and off depending on certain circumstances, and certain switches could flip in a way that all of a sudden now it started for him.
Is that why they say stress exaggerates hair loss?
Stress is more shedding. So it's called telogen effluvium, and there's a difference between shedding and actual hair loss. Because when you shed from stress, oftentimes you will see it come out in clumps in areas that are localized, not necessarily like symmetrically all the way across your scalp. So androgenic alopecia, you'll see like a pattern of recession that is very indicative of like DHT affecting it, versus if you had just like a bout of horrendous stress. Like, for example, I had a friend who, when he was trying to become a firefighter, he was getting hazed like crazy, and he literally had like a patch fall out of the side of his head, and it grew back white, and eventually it came back. But like, that's an example of alopecia caused by stress. Like, it was not a uniform recession pattern that is indicative of androgens. So people have to remember there's a difference between hair loss and androgenic alopecia, which is like androgen-induced alopecia being hair loss. So to get in front of androgenic alopecia, which is the thing most guys deal with, that is typically hormonal. So like in your case, I would use, tracking to actually decide if you want to take drugs or not, or if it's even necessary. And then at that point, if it's still happening, you're like, okay, I want to get in front of it now. How do I do it? The number one thing that is the most impactful is something called finasteride. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. Inhibits the production of something called DHT, which is the primary hormone that dictates masculine characteristics. Like in adolescence, the thing that will differentiate and mature you as a male is DHT the most. Like if you don't have any DHT, you will end up with a micropenis, an array of features that are not representative of like a fully grown male. So DHT is like the opposite hormone to estrogen, essentially. And testosterone is like somewhat not in the middle, but it's like on the spectrum of androgen versus estrogen, feminine versus masculine. And you can, like, you see this all the time in bodybuilding or in transitioning individuals, manual manipulation of this that shows that even in adulthood, people who are manually using these hormones can literally like flip-flop genders, essentially. Because it's like, there's nothing really differentiating somebody other than like anatomically to some extent, but also in adolescence, if you expose some girl to hyper androgenic state with exogenous hormones, like, you could literally make her seem like a dude to any objective metric of somebody seeing her. They'd be like, that's 100% a guy, even though she might not be. So like, these things can be manipulated to where if you take finasteride, this hormone DHT really has no impact on muscle growth, strength. The thing it mainly dictates is sebum production, which is like oil in the skin, essentially, prostate size. It inhibits estrogen's activities in some tissues. It does things that are important, but it's more primarily in adolescence where you don't want to be inhibiting it, because you may end up in a state of like hindered development, essentially, to say the least. But in adulthood, when you take it, you could prevent the further miniaturization of hair follicles. Key note being the further miniaturization. You're not going to necessarily reverse miniaturization. You might get some regrowth as you inhibit the process of expediting itself. But ultimately, once you implement this blockade of hormone, essentially, it becomes far more difficult to miniaturize at all. Because even in studies, we'll see individuals with deficiencies in the enzyme that makes this hormone, no temporal recession at all, less body hair, like everything about them is slightly less masculine by metrics of like male secondary sexual characteristics, but they never lose their hair. So it's like, if you can replicate that to some extent that is non-impactful from a side effect context, you can kind of replicate that state to some extent in adulthood after you fully developed. And that's
so isn't that just about waiting until you're already fully developed to start finasteride?
Yeah. So like, ideally you would wait until you're a full grown adult, and then you would get on it if you need it. The problem is that it's not a side effect free drug, and some people end up with pretty significant issues. All but a minority they're a very outspoken minority, and justifiably so, because they have some pretty significant issues sometimes. No one should ever say like blindly, this is 100% safe, you will be fine. The likelihood is high you'll have no issues. Like objectively by data, it's like very unlikely you'll have issues, but there is a possibility.
So if you have none of the negative side effects, is there anything just bad about putting in some manufactured thing into your system?
Like a synthetic drug?
Sure. Or just finasteride in general. Like if the studies are showing, the data is showing that the likelihood of some negative byproduct to take this thing, the negative symptom, is so small and you don't get any of those, then would you say it's fine? If you want to just take your chances.
Yeah, if you have no side effects, for sure, get on that shit. I'm on dutasteride, which is like the even more aggressive format of finasteride that inhibits almost all of my DHT. Like my hormone levels on paper look like a girl for DHT. And yet I'm sitting here with a masculine voice. My brain's working well, at least to date, knock on wood. Muscle is fine. Like nothing is perceivably wrong that would justify me coming off. And a lot of people are similar in that aspect. So I'm not to say that I'm the reference case whatsoever, but just giving like an anecdote of even in the hyper extreme, some people use dutasteride too, which is like an even more aggressive drug and have no issues. There's like one guy who has a registered IQ that's like second best on the planet, and he's been on dutasteride for decades. Not to say that's a justification for it, but it's good to see both sides of the coin because you often hear the horror stories. The thing with the internet, the most outspoken people are not the people who take drugs and get results and just like don't care about it anymore. It's people who tried something and had a horrendous outcome and want to warn the world about it, which is fine. And I think they should. But when you take something, like for example, if you took Tylenol and it got rid of your headache, are you going to go on Reddit and be like, took Tylenol, it was great, got rid of my headache? Of course not. So with hair loss, a lot of guys, they're like, oh, I heard I should take finasteride. I saw an ad on Philip DeFranco's show for, Keeps or something. I'm going to just jump on it. Mm-hmm. They get on it, stops their hair loss, and you never hear from them again. And they never post about it because why would they? But then people who take it, the whatever percent of people, and they have either some minor issue or a significant issue that is like very noticeable, they're on the internet fucking talking about it. How do I fix it? Talking with other people. Your experience was this? Oh, this happened to me. And I get it. But at the same time, I think it's almost like the positive results are underrepresented.
Yeah. Anecdotally, I've talked to a lot of people who are on finasteride, and from everyone that I've talked to, only one person said they knew of someone who had negative effects, and that stopped as soon as they stopped taking it.
And part of the issue too is now with the internet, it's so well known, this stuff, that a lot of people placebo themselves into side effects.
Yeah.
So I'm not to say that the side effects aren't real. I know of people that I don't think are just placebo that have pretty significant issues, but a lot of it is like people do just fine. And a lot of people who do have issues, they're like, I think my erection quality is worse than it was, but I'm not really sure. I'm like, is it really? Like if you
gotta have benchmarks.
Yeah.
Take the photo. They gotta do every month.
Take the photo, man.
They gotta do the Bryan Johnson thing where they like measure their penis every night.
But what about red light therapy? Jack and I were actually at the gym. This was maybe 2 months ago, and the guy from Iris Store came up to me and said, I'd love to give you the helmet. Just try it out. We're not going to ask anything of you. I just want to give this to you. Let us know what you think. And so I've been trying it, but it's too early to tell.
Yeah. For me, what I have noticed is almost nothing. So I have the most expensive custom version of that helmet made by a guy who literally all he does is sit at home and create these with actual, there's like a difference between the lasers that are impactful on actually achieving the outcome you want versus like, as far as I know, there's LEDs and lasers, and what you want to get is as dense of a concentration of these certain lasers that impact the metrics of hair growth that you're trying to get out of it. And some of it is like the Iris Store stuff. A lot of it is margin consideration oriented because it's like they have to market the shit out of this thing and they can't afford the best, most intensive device possible, plus all the marketing that goes into selling it, plus maintain the margin. And hair growth is such a slow and kind of like ambiguous process that it's very easy to even get placeboed into thinking it's working because you had a good hair day or whatever. But most people who use it don't sustain therapy. So there's like a cop out even where you probably didn't use it properly. And then in addition to that, it's not guaranteed to work for everyone is what they'll maybe assert at best. But in general, I have never seen anybody in my life, and I've looked into this shit to no end, have such a significant result that it like completely averted the necessity to use actual therapies that move the needle. So it was typically an adjunct that some people claim might have helped to some extent, but to put into perspective, like this stuff I spent a significant amount of time researching it and spending my own money on things that I wanted to see how well they worked. And like I spent, I don't know, like $2,000 on some device that was custom made with the most dense concentration of lasers you could possibly get legally. And I didn't notice anything. Now, did I use it long enough? Did I do it properly? You know, if I didn't, I don't think I would have seen if I continued. Like it was just annoying to use too. Like that's a significant hindrance for me to add anything to my routine that is different now. It's not easy to work when I have this thing on my head, at least I found.
See, I put it on before going to bed. I'm watching some TV or something like that. I put it on 12 minutes. I'm going to give it 6 months.
Okay.
Let's see what happens. I think I'm maybe like a month into it, so we'll see.
Yeah, the Iris Store, if you don't have like an actual metric to go by too, it's very difficult to know that it worked or not, because there is like a hair analysis you could do to actually see per square centimeter like how many hairs are there versus before and after, and that's how they'll assess treatment validity and clinically. And with this stuff, it's like you're just gonna go objectively by what your hair looks like in the mirror, and the likely outcome is you might be like, I don't know, it might have helped, might have not. And it's like for something to take up like however many minutes of your life on a every other day or daily basis, it's like, is that worth 1% of results? Typically, I would say no. And that's even me who cares about this stuff a lot.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's fair. What do you think the obsession is, it seems, in social media with testosterone?
Yeah, like I don't know what spurred it for sure. Like ultimately, it is the hormone that dictates muscle growth potential relative to your response to it. So I could see why people would focus on it, but it's interesting that it gets the hype it does, because there are other hormones that are just as impactful in their own unique ways, like estrogen or whatever, and no one really talks about those. But yeah, testosterone is, if you're low, it'll, you know, mess with your life pretty significantly. You'll have a harder time building muscle, libido's down, etc. So
seems like I've had a lot of friends too that have all recently gotten tested, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea my testosterone was this low." You know, it explains so much. So I went and got tested, and I thought, "Oh man, like maybe if my motivation isn't as good, I'm not putting on as much muscle in the gym, like maybe I have low testosterone." And then I was also concerned that I've never been able to grow a beard. And I was thinking, oh, crap, like I for sure have low testosterone. It came back like 800 and something, like on the really high end. Yep. And so then I was like, well, you know, that doesn't explain I can't grow a beard. Is that just genetic?
Yeah, so genes will dictate often how your predisposition to certain things are. Like Asians, you will typically never see with thick body hair. Do they all have low test? No. You know, some of them, it's just the way their skin... I could probably find the answer if I dug in and found like what is it about them that causes less proliferation of like hair follicle development or whatever. But in general, your hormones are going to enhance whatever your potential is. But like, for example, if you shot yourself with Mr. Olympia level steroid dosages, you would not necessarily look even a semblance like them. You would max out whatever you could get to with your genetics, but ultimately those are your genetics. Just like Hormozy shows up with a 120 test and the guy's yoked out of his tree. You know, like that guy, if he gets on testosterone, his 800 that he's manually adjusted to is like the equivalent of another guy with actual above average genetics getting on grams and grams of stuff. So the difference in genetic response is huge. And then also it's your body's regulating feedback in which it determines how much you need to fulfill functions. So just because your testes shoot out 800, first of all, it's a snapshot in time. It fluctuates wildly over the day. So you could have 800 at the time you tested it, but it could dip up and down throughout the day, like up 300.
Oh, wow.
Doesn't mean that it's like good or bad necessarily. And there is ways to use those numbers as guidance tools of like, generally, does this kind of like correspond to why I feel a certain way? I kind of understand like what's going on. It is useful, but the number doesn't always mean everything. So like I know guys who have 500 total test that are way more jacked than guys who have 1,000. It's just like your response, and it's not even just muscle. It's also like psychoactive activity. It's your ability to support bone strength. It's like there's a ton of processes that are partially determined by testosterone, and your body, the way it produces things, it's based on what it thinks you need based on the circumstance you've imposed on it. So for you to achieve whatever outcome your body deems as ideal, it's shooting out 800. For another guy, it might be 400. For another guy, it might be 1,200. It depends on the person. So, and that's not good or bad. It can be used as a proxy for assessing, in general, does this look low? And maybe that's explaining why I feel a certain way and have symptoms. But if you're symptom free and your testosterone's like 470, for example, I wouldn't tell that guy, like, oh, you're on the lowish end, you should probably take testosterone. I certainly would not do that.
So what are symptoms?
Morning wood being gone is a pretty common one. Erectile dysfunction, lack of drive, motivation, general feelings of being tired all the time unexplainably, emotional volatility, lack of ability to build muscle. All of a sudden you're losing strength in the gym, or it's harder to put on muscle or keep off fat. There's a lot of metrics that are kind of vague sounding. Like, how am I going to look in the gym?
It's kind of arbitrary.
Yeah. So that's kind of where the blood work helps correspond with the symptoms. So if you generally feel not great, it's worth checking. And especially one of the easiest ways to tell, in my opinion, is like erectile quality and libido and drive. That's kind of like one of the main things I use as a tool for like no guy should be waking up or trying to have sex with his wife or whatever and like being incapable of doing so. They might have a vascular problem, which, you know, a lot of guys have heart disease or are on their way there. So that might be causing the erection issues too. But that's where the blood work helps, because it's like, oh, well, my testosterone levels look normal, as do the other hormones in that subsystem. But my other markers that are like circulatory look mangled. And then it's like, okay, well, is that the cause of my erection issues? Maybe it's not the testosterone. So blood work ultimately is useful to actually get really granular and figure out what is wrong with me and why, or where could I optimize? Should I optimize? And getting like a full picture.
Do you feel like people are using testosterone now as almost a Band-Aid to improve their life in some sort of way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think especially in the entrepreneur side of things, these guys are like, and again, it's like, is that bad necessarily? Who am I to say that you shouldn't do that? It's your body. You can do whatever you want. But yeah, like I think a lot of people are the sexy idea of TRT. Like, oh, you know, it's going to help enhance my mental drive, productivity, muscle growth, etc. Certainly could. I'm not to say it's not. Like, it actually is impactful, especially as you get 35 plus. You will reliably, in general, this isn't everyone though, your testosterone may go down upwards of like 1% a year. In perpetuity. That's just you deteriorating as a human, unfortunately. And at that point, is it unwarranted to supplement back up to what you were when you were 21? I don't know. It's like, for some people, they're definitely in that fringe, like weird gray area where it's like, you know, I feel pretty okay, but like, I probably don't need it, but maybe it would help. And it's kind of like, there's no like real way to define at that point, should I be doing it or not? All you need to know is what goes into it, though, and what circumstance you're imposing on yourself and the risk to make that decision. And then you have to make an educated path forward yourself, essentially, because it's like, okay, do I care about now having to monitor my fertility metrics all the time? Do I want to have a kid? When do I want to have a kid? Do I care about having to monitor my blood work to make sure that my injection schedule isn't resulting in too much red blood cell production? I'm going to like increase my chance of a heart attack. There are certain things that you got to be mindful of. Do I want to be injecting something for the rest of my life? You know, do I want to be, have atrophied testicles, which can be, you can do things to make sure that doesn't happen. But like, there are considerations. I think all of a sudden your life involves many more things to look at that you didn't even think about before.
What about other things that people ingest, like weed or alcohol or microdosing, even microdosing? What are your thoughts on those things? I don't know if you partake in any of those things.
In general, for anything that is not enhancing of like productivity and could cloud my mind, or I don't know, some people could assert that they're like creativity enhancing, but that doesn't really help me as much, at least what I've determined in my work. So I don't microdose with anything. I don't use psychedelics. I don't smoke weed. I don't want something that messes with my hunger. I don't want something that messes with my sleep quality, which weed will do to some extent. To me, it's never been, those aren't drugs that I even really look at that closely, because they aren't conducive to the state of mind or state of just whole body anything that I want to be in. So will they be impactful on hormone levels though, if that's the question? Or
just in general? I remember, like, for some reason I think about this still to this day. Steve Will Do It said, do you know who that is? Yeah. So he said, I only got to work out high. If I'm working out high, you know I'm going to have a good workout.
Yeah.
That's
good
what
impression.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So he like feels like, Jesus, man, come on, dude. You feel like you got to really break those out right now?
Jack's going to have Jack, ask him the question. You've been curious about this question.
First, I got to do this, though.
Oh, you know, we're all
So
doing this.
yeah, how often do you look in the mirror and flex?
Not as much as I used to. Yeah. I don't know.
5 times a day, or
No. You guys just had Hormozy on, so this is not even like a comparable situation.
I'm curious. In my situation, I go to the gym pretty much every day. I do 20 minutes of cardio in that workout, which is usually about an hour.
Yeah.
I think I eat pretty healthy. I don't eat dessert most of the time. I try to stay away from sugars. I cannot seem to lose the belly fat
Yeah.
that obscures the lower, like, third of the abs.
Mhm.
It's been like a year. No matter what I do, it seems like it's hopeless.
And do you count calories?
No.
Dude, that's
But I don't. But like objectively, I'm not eating that much. So
Yeah,
like
but
I kind of think, if I'm on the treadmill for 20 minutes on the highest incline, I know I burn 200 calories on that thing. I'm working out. I'm not eating that much. The coffee, I barely put any creamer in the coffee. Like I'm just thinking, I should be seeing some results here.
How many
if I'm
grams
watching.
of protein do you eat per day, and how many calories do you eat? Can you answer either of those? No.
I would guess within a range, but I wouldn't answer precisely.
Well, there you
no.
go.
Yeah.
So, like, oftentimes what people find is, like, at the end of the day, if I'm, let's just say my maintenance calories, which is the calories I need to maintain my body weight, let's just say it's like 2,800, for example, with my exercise and everything I'm doing. A lot of times what people will end up is in a situation where they are very close to their goal and then wreck it with like minor little things that they're not accounting for. Not counting very basic condiments, stuff they're putting in shit, little things that all add up. And that compounded over time, similarly to investing, equates to an outcome that is not optimal. However, if you're even in like a 200 calorie deficit, which is not that hard to dollar cost average in your diet,
Right.
over time, the compounded outcome is you losing multiple pounds over the span of a year, to where your body composition at the end is you having satisfactory results versus you having no results. So it's like in the micro, the little choices that you're not counting, like the fact that you've even told me you don't know what the calories are exactly, but you're pretty sure you're in a range of, but you're not able to lose the weight that you want to lose, or you're not able to gain the muscle you want, and your hormones look good on paper. Again, obviously there's response to the hormones can differ, but ultimately, if you have not counted meticulously, like if you are counting with extreme scrutiny, it's literally a physical impossibility to not lose weight.
Do you think there's any merit to, let's say, not eating enough and your body's kind of like holding on to what it has because it's like you're eating at random times, or I'm not eating for the first half of the day?
Like you're either expending more than you're taking in, or you're not. Like there's a very and then, one or the other.
What about not drinking water? Because I realized all day today, except for a little bit this morning, I've not had any water, just besides.
Yeah, it's not
coffee.
great.
That's what I tell him. That is like one of my
do you think
main
more
gripes.
Water?
Yes.
I don't think you're gonna like not lose weight because of inadequate hydration though.
Yeah.
But what I would do, that's a really good hack, is get a water bottle that is like big enough that you only need to refill it once a day or something.
I did that. I went on Amazon. I got the one where it's like a gallon
Yeah.
or it's like a gallon and a half or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And there are different markers that say like by this time drink this much, by this much.
Yeah.
And I did it for a few days, but I was just peeing like 5 times, before noon. It got too distracting because like every 30 minutes I just have to get up and go pee.
We'll stagger it out more, maybe. I don't know. Like ultimately, there's a certain amount of hydration you need, and then if you're pissing it all out, like I would wonder, like what are you eating? That is,
But you know what? Maybe for me, I'm smaller, so I don't need the full gallon of water.
yeah, like there's
for someone-
there's general rules to follow. I could pull up the calculation. I forget what it is. That's like a good general range of a target each day. But yeah, man, like ultimately, if you're counting meticulously, like you can pretty reliably determine even how fast you will lose. So I don't know if you track the scale closely, but you should be weighing yourself once when you wake up after you take your morning piss. That's your metric that you're using. And over the week, you will have an average of numbers that you either gained or lost. And yeah, the number will fluctuate up and down based on water retention, food that's in your stomach versus not at some points. And that's why some days you might actually gain weight, even though you ate in a deficit. Yeah. But over the average of the week, you will lose weight if you're in a deficit in general.
Yeah, I think the only way I could be screwing this up, honestly, is just all you could eat sushi.
I would
at the one time.
I would also say that if you're not tracking your protein, similar to what you asked earlier about if I'm eating in a deficit, doesn't matter if it's Oreos or whatever.
Yeah.
It will affect your body composition. So even if you lose weight, you don't want to end up skinny fat, which is a situation a lot of people end up in where they're like inadequately muscled, but they've lost weight. But a lot of it was lean muscle that they relied on that was expending calories at rest, because muscle is metabolically active tissue that while you're sitting here is burning up more calories than your fat. So like being as muscle bound as possible is like pretty key too for more sustainably staying lean. And it's just healthier than having fat on your body to begin with. So that protein, calorie counting, but also I don't know what your training's like, but I think a lot of people overlook the importance of like tracking the weight. So keeping a logbook, even if it seems cumbersome and annoying, if you're not like actually holding yourself to a standard of progressively overloading, you're not giving your body a reason to adapt. So you could go in the gym and actually work pretty hard, but if it's not something that is over the threshold of necessary to stimulate further growth, you will kind of be not making progress, regardless if everything else looks good. Like you could lose weight and like, you know, achieve certain metrics, but you'll never optimize if you're not trying to gain muscle, progressively overloading, tracking numbers. Yeah. And yeah, some people can intuitively do that. Some people need to write it down, and I don't think that's a problem. Like if you're in the gym and last week you did, 50 pounds on the dumbbell press for 12 reps per set, like next time try 55 on set 1 and then do like, 50-50 or whatever. And like you just have to impose constant levels of adaptation, similar to what you do in anything in life. You're not going to adapt if you don't push yourself into an uncomfortable state to some extent. So
got it.
I think Graham also needs to do legs. He never does legs. And wouldn't legs be good
Jack,
for
way to
weight
call me
loss?
out.
Because like you said, if you have muscles, they metabolize faster than fat. So if he had muscles on his legs, then it would be good for weight loss.
yeah, assuming that's a pretty big muscle group to skip. So
Why are you gonna call me out like that, Jack? You gotta edit that out.
I'm trying to provide constructive criticism, but would working out legs, that's good for weight loss, right?
oh, 100%. Yeah.
But you could also work out legs on the incline on the treadmill, right? At 15 inclines. So like the top incline. That does something though, right? That's pretty good.
It's better than sitting.
Yeah.
For sure.
So technically.
Do what you could do. And I don't like this. It didn't work out for me and I'd never use it, but it's a desk that you can move to standing and then putting like a small treadmill in it or something. So whenever you're doing, I can't focus when I do this, but some people do great. When you're doing like tedious meetings that you don't necessarily need to have like perfect sound quality, or potentially if you're just like reading through emails or reading reports that you could focus on that don't require like the most intensive attention, getting steps in while you are working could be done too. It's just like, I don't know.
That's how I prepare for podcasts. Is always on the treadmill and I just download videos and I watch them.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, but yeah, man, like download like MyFitnessPal or something, like a free app, and you just track the calories and it'll make a difference.
Yeah.
What do you think about Adderall? Negative side effects. Do some people need it? Do some people not need it? Is it overprescribed? How do you know when you need it? How consistently should you take it if you're taking it?
All right, let me try.
I have a lot of questions, and I've spoke about this actually in a brand deal that we had with BetterHelp. But I said that I was diagnosed with ADHD and I got prescribed Adderall. I took it for about 2 years straight, every single day.
At what age?
I was probably 19 to 21, or maybe 20 to 22.
What was your dose?
I initially started out, I think, at 10. And then I got up to 20 XR, and I was taking 20 XR every day.
Yeah, so there's a few things I could say. I think it is overprescribed, first of all. I think a lot of people think that they have ADHD when they might just have like bad sleep patterns or poor lifestyle. Because like at the end of the day, the thing that's the most impactful on your cognitive state is going to be diet, exercise, sleep. Like you could take any amount of drugs, it will not make up for those things, as like boring as that might sound. Even when you look to literature, you can offset deficits in performance when you're sleep deprived through these drugs often, like modafinil and whatnot, but you will not really enhance your state above baseline, at least by studies, if you are well slept and like in a good state for working. But, I think it is overprescribed. I think a lot of people are using it unnecessarily. I think a lot of people think that they tie good outcomes to it because they used it and then something good happened while they were on it, or they felt like they were more productive while they were on it. So then they need it and they tie that to that activity to like, I need it in order to work now. It's almost like the crutches, like Hormozy talks about. Like, you don't want to be the guy who needs Adderall to like do good business, you know? Like, that guy's gonna get decimated by a guy like Alex who can be underslept and doesn't need anything. So with that, it's like, yeah, there are negative side effects. It will reliably increase your heart rate, blood pressure, while in general that could be relatively benign in the short term, and like the studies they look at, in the long term, that compounded with everything else, it's just another risk factor that you're adding into the equation. And with XR in particular, it's called half-life. It's like how long it takes for half the drug to work its way out of your system. That half-life is so long that it's almost certainly impacting your sleep quality, to where it's like a vicious circle effect where you take it in order to be as cognitively dialed as you can. It's still in your system when you go to bed. You get poor sleep, and then you need Adderall to fix your state because you feel like you're not sharp enough. And then it keeps going. So I see a lot of people end up on really high dosages, and yet their state of mind at that point they got to is often worse than them at baseline, like before they even started it. So I'm not to say it doesn't have utility at all. I think in certain circumstances, like if you are sleep deprived to hell and you like need to attenuate the deficit in performance because you're about to do something that is, you know, you can't not perform, like, you know, could be worthwhile. And it definitely shows in the literature that is like caffeine, modafinil, all these things can make up for deficits in sleep in the short term. But at the end of the day, it could be at the expense of tomorrow's sleep and then in perpetuity thereafter if you continue to push it down that road. So, and also stimulating like synthetic release of dopamine and like stress hormones, or kind of like fight or flight hormones. Neurotransmitters that are like stress inducing aren't necessarily always conducive to high quality work. Sometimes you might feel like you're revved up and you're mentally driven, but you're kind of like, some people just end up more all over the place. In addition, at least for me, Adderall makes my libido go through the roof. So for me, I actually get almost preoccupied with sex when I take it, to the point that it's like whatever increase in performance I might get is offset entirely by me wanting to bang my girlfriend like 3 times. And that's not good for work. You know, it's hard to focus when that's happening. So like, I know some guys who literally say when they take it, they just end up jerking off all day instead of working. That's an actual outcome that happens. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Because it's like when you're flooding your brain with like feel good dopaminergic activity.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily always going to translate into like, I'm going to make good YouTube videos, or I'm going to write a good paper for school.
Is that just discipline, or is that how the mind is wired?
It depends on the person.
Okay.
Yeah. Because like some people take it and don't get an effect on appetite too. But a lot of people, like me included, if I take it, I have no appetite. I could not eat pretty much all day. So, and that's another way people abuse it, especially in the fitness industry, is they take, they either smoke, or they take a lot of nicotine or a lot of caffeine or Adderall, and it'll crush their appetite in order to not eat. And they take steroids to offset the loss in lean muscle, and they will basically be like shredded all the time and offset any like deterioration in performance, at least they try to, through like stimulants, steroids, etc. So, you know, that's all to say that if you have ADHD and you need it, like I'm sure there is an actual utility where it is needed, because there are certain people with certain genetic predispositions neurologically that I couldn't speak to, like, you are lying about your situation. Like, they probably need it. But I think a lot of times it is too general of a classification that doesn't take into account like all of the variables. Because when you go in for an Adderall like assessment, if you are somebody with ADHD for Ritalin or Vyvanse or any of the stuff, they're not going to ask you like, have you tried optimizing your sleep yet? Like, what's your diet?
They don't know.
Yeah, it'd be like, write this checklist, and it's like, do you feel, I don't know, unproductive, or do you feel like you get distracted more than X times per day or whatever? And it's like, I get it, but at the same time, it's like, I think a lot of people are getting on it that don't need it. And I think a lot of people are using it for the purposes at which, I don't know, in the short term for certain like circumstances, it could be helpful, but like, it's certainly not an everyday med that you would want to do.
So I think my concern with Adderall and everybody thinking they have ADHD, because if you talk to people that are my age, I'm sure a lot of the commenters can attest to this. Everybody thinks that they have ADHD, but I think that it's more just a cause of spending so much time on like TikTok, Instagram, with commercials, distractions, all of these things that give you instant gratification, kind of turn you into a proxy ADHD person. But then it was actually when I started going to therapy, is actually BetterHelp, they pointed out some things where before I had TikTok and all of these distractions and I couldn't watch TV until a certain time of day, it's like, did you experience this when you were a kid? And it's like actual things that are indicative of it. And I relate it to when I was a kid. That for me was like the most mind blowing. But I feel like everybody thinks nowadays that they suffer from ADHD or just have it. I shouldn't say suffer from it.
Yeah, like a lot of people I know now have burner phones intentionally. So the only thing their phone does is like emergency functions. And then the phone that has social media and stuff on it for work is not around unless they're posting, and then they get rid of it immediately. Like Joe Rogan, for example, he has a burner phone and it has like nothing on it. And
That's
That'd
genius.
make a great product. It's just like a really nice
That ladybug thing.
Yeah,
You
it's
remember
like an optimized phone without any apps or anything, where it's just a phone and texting.
That's
it doesn't let you download the stuff you mean? Like it's just like
It's just
well,
just
there
phone
is
and
one of those
texting.
actually.
What?
I saw it. It's a commercial. It's like also in black and white. It's
yeah,
like
one of the hacks too that I got from Alex is you go into your color settings in your phone and you can turn it on grayscale and it like cuts the dopamine kind of spike from social media a decent amount.
yeah, you just want to spend less time on your phone.
Yeah. It's like far less interesting to scroll mindlessly when you have like no vivid colors blasting in your face. Yeah. So like there's stuff you can do. It's just like obviously it takes discipline too to even avoid like don't go get the actual phone. Like leave it.
Yeah.
You know?
Isn't it better though just to practice discipline at the end of the day
is,
of just
but-
setting boundaries for yourself and sticking with it?
What I will say though, dude, is as much as I would love to say that everyone just needs to like, you know, get their shit together and be as disciplined as possible, some of the most respected people, some of the people I respect the most in health, fitness, whatever, they also just like employ practices of not having it in the house to not have to deal with it. Like their strategy is ultimately don't have it around. As much as I want to say, like, do you guys just have like the insane mental fortitude and you haven't like ate shitty for so long that you just don't care about it anymore? They're like, no, I actually like don't have it in the house because if I do, I will eat it. I'm like, damn, even like the most respected, qualified guys.
Yeah, that's kind of like me with desserts or sweets. It's the sweets that you can't stop with just one, like having M&Ms or Oreos and things like this. I really try not to keep them in the house because it's so easy just to eat one.
Yeah.
And then one more and one more. And one's not bad, but it just it rarely ever stops at one.
And like you only have so much mental fortitude that gets chopped away at over the day that, you know, and this is why people often snack at nighttime or do whatever and like make, you know, I don't know, like they will basically cave at the end of the day on themselves and like completely fuck up their diets for an array of different things. But the less things you have to impose on your environment that make you have to dig into that mental fortitude, like the easier it is to just like smoothly cruise through life and not cheat on the diet, for example. So yeah, like Peter Attia, for example, super respected guy. He has multiple kids who do sometimes eat good snacks. And now what they do is they take the kids out for ice cream whenever they want ice cream, not have ice cream in the house. Like he will drive them to an ice cream place and get them ice cream, but he won't have drumsticks in the freezer because he will decimate them. Self-admittedly, which I think is cool because a lot of guys could act like, and very much would, like I'm this hard guy and like I have the insane mental fortitude and just don't be a pussy, don't eat junk. How could you, you know, just don't do it. Easier said than done for a lot of people. So like for me, I try my best to not have stuff in the house. It's like my hack, if you can call it that. Peter also brushes his teeth right after dinner. Like he does this whole like brush routine right after he finishes eating. Because if you're around for hours before you go to bed, you're more likely to cheat.
Skip.
Yeah. So it's like trying to impose on yourself, having that. You feel like a double idiot if you brushed and flossed and did everything, and then you have to do it again because you wanted to eat like an almond or something.
I feel like David Goggins is the only person out there with real discipline.
Imagine it turned out that he actually was like
He's
totally
like
normal
totally
dude.
snacking. Yeah.
Yeah, but that guy is like, it's wild too because I asked Joe, like I don't know David myself, but I was like, is there any like pivotal event that kind of like he was self-admittedly like he used to be fat, out of shape, and something triggered in him that made him adopt this hyper disciplined like approach to life. And you know, perhaps it's in his book and I should just read the book, but it's like it's interesting how some people are, you know, not the representation of health and discipline, and they even pivot thereafter despite having decades of like bad habits. So obviously it's something you can change, but I certainly wouldn't use David as like the reference of like he does this,
That's the benchmark.
so I should be able to like keep junk in my house, do this, do that, and just avoid everything bad. And I don't think that's the reasonable goal for most people.
How do you think you can increase discipline for people, because I know so many people and I think discipline is just plummeting.
Yeah.
I think it's like, I mean, it's like bad how quickly it's just falling off of a cliff. How can people hopefully grab onto the discipline, like bring it back up there?
I do think that maybe, as redundant as it is, imposing less situations where you have to dig into like situations that require your mental bandwidth allocation to be disciplined equals a greater amount of like a resource to allocate to actual things that are worthwhile, rather than like literally thinking in my mind how to avoid a drumstick in my freezer. Like, just don't have it in the house. Like, that's something that I think is reasonable. I think also setting like micro achievable goals that you can get that feedback from is worthwhile. So like, if you don't go to the gym at all, rather than expecting yourself to be in this perfect, routine immediately, just like, let's just show up, show up and like get on a treadmill or something. Like, just getting to the gym is like a task in itself for some people, as absurd as it sounds. And just setting like progressively overloading your goals, as dumb and workout bro as that sounds, it's totally applicable, like even when you're setting your goals for the year, if I want to hit this many subscribers, or I want to get this, or I want to do that, like a lot of things are more daunting in the macro, but when you get granular on the micro, like they're far more achievable and a lot more easy to wrap your head around how you could actually get to the macro goal. When you look at all these micro increments that if I just hit these at the end of the day have compounded to this like finality and conclusive outcome that is huge. So like, for me, I even try to get granular about like how much, how many, if I was posting regularly, how many views do I think is reasonable to get like per day, or like what's a subscriber per day metric that is, I think, good to achieve good growth of the brand, or revenue per day that is going to be sustainable to achieve this end outcome at the end of the year that I think is a good year. Like, I don't really look as much at the end year number as I do on the micro. What do I need to do like this week to actually equate to the habits that would result in that final outcome? And I think it's a lot easier for people to actually get out of a funk or discipline themselves to start, because otherwise it's too daunting to even do anything seemingly. So those are two things that I think are pretty actionable. But also it's like the lifestyle things we talked about. Like, if you're low on sleep, like, good luck. It's going to be far more difficult to make rational decisions. You're going to be more emotionally volatile. You almost can't even trust your mindset when you are in a suboptimal state of health. So I think just getting as healthy as you can and dialing in things that are really low-hanging fruit. Like, everyone's bed is in their house. Everyone is capable of getting in it and getting 8 hours. It's just like most don't. So, that kind of stuff makes a big difference too on your decision-making process. And am I going to sit here and play video games because I'm kind of like feeling down and I kind of want that dopamine hit of whatever, versus am I going to go work? So hopefully that's helpful for some people.
It sounds like the main thing here is sleep. Like, that's the thing that you consistently bring up over and over and over again. And I'll say in my own life, I've tried so many different hacks to try to improve like the way that I feel when I wake up in the morning, or just like maybe my overall mental well-being. Mm-hmm. And the three things I've noticed actually have an impact, because usually I don't see any results with all of the things I've tried, is sleep, diet, and resistance training.
There you go.
Those are the three things. And sleep is so
It is, but sometimes you could sleep
crucial.
too much. And I feel just as bad sleeping too much as I do undersleeping.
That's also probably a bit psychological too, because you just wasted part of your valuable day. So I'm not necessarily saying you should oversleep by any means. You should go by like metrics of like, you can tell when you've had a good sleep, and sometimes it's not always reflected by the number. So like, if you get up at 7 hours and you feel great, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to force yourself to stay in bed for 8. Mm-hmm. And if you feel underslept at 8, maybe you need 9 that day. I don't think people need to get too hyper specific about this, but it's worth like whatever you need getting it. I think is like at least worth seeing on a regular basis. What's my month look like with actually trying to hit at least 8 hours or whatever makes me feel good, and not making myself get out of bed when the alarm goes off that I set for 5.5 hours because I thought I'd get more work done. Because at least pretty reliably, you will find that your quality of work is so much worse proportionally that it does not make up for the hours that you lost by getting up early. So, or not getting up early.
Yeah. Do you ever meditate or journal?
No. And I think that some of that stuff is often overhyped as to its impact. But I also think that it's like free, and I think a lot of people do benefit from it. So I think if you're somebody who finds benefit and needs to like reflect on things or needs to calm down, and that helps you calm down, by all means. I don't think it's not helpful. I just don't feel it's, I wouldn't want to do it, and I don't do it. Some people notice big benefit from it though, you know?
I notice a good benefit from journaling. Because a lot of the times, if I'm struggling through some sort of an issue, I start just writing, and it just kind of tracks what my mind is thinking at a given moment. And then it always starts out really negative, but by the end of the journaling session, it turns out very positive. And I don't know what it is, but like I feel like you automatically want to spin things in a positive way. And it is only how you let it affect yourself. So if you let it affect yourself in a positive way, it becomes a positive thing. And so that's where I found the benefit in journaling, is just that.
Yeah, I think if anything is actually impacting your ability to perceive situations and like emotionally respond in a more favorable way, and it only took you like sitting down and writing about it for 15 minutes or something, like do that for sure. Some people like think about stuff in the shower. Some people think about it while they're walking. Some people talk to their significant other. Like people have their own ways of working through stuff, and just because somebody doesn't do it who you respect, it doesn't mean it's not valuable. So I'm sure there's lots of people that do and don't journal who are like successful or whatever.
Let's switch. Let's talk about prime hydration. Logan Paul called you a virgin.
Yeah.
And so you responded with a 3-hour video. What situations do you think that prime would be good?
Yeah, I think that if you are somebody who wants something that is artificially sweetened and tastes very good to enhance your fluid intake, because some people just don't drink enough water, at that point, I would say whatever potential negatives come from artificial sweeteners, which are very speculative and not really founded by literature in humans, if you're literally not going to drink water to a degree that it's impactful on your health in a negative way, but you will drink that much fluid with this stuff that's like super sweet, whatever, especially if you have a kid and he's just refusing to hydrate properly, then yeah, that could be helpful. Because a lot of those, like, it's kind of wild to me because despite them getting older, like Logan and KSI are like almost 30 or 30, their fan base seems to stay around the same demographic almost. Like it just...
Matthew McConaughey. He gets older, but they stay the same age.
Literally. I do think that some of those children may, like, I've heard of insane examples where kids will literally, if they don't want to eat what their parents have for them that they deemed as healthy, they'll just like not eat, or they'll do things that are, I don't know, like they will avoid drinking enough water because they just don't like the taste of water. It doesn't taste good. So if the only way it's going to get them to hydrate is by drinking this stuff, like could be worthwhile. Other than that though, it's like, or if they're potassium deficient, which is some people are in their diets, could be helpful too. A lot of people have sodium rich diets that aren't exercising regularly and aren't sweating a lot and don't need more sodium in a hydration drink. So those individuals, if you're going to like pound an electrolyte formula, which you probably didn't even need to begin with, like that's where a potassium rich one might be a better choice than one with a bunch of sodium in it, because you're already like fully topped out on sodium. You don't need any more. But a lot of people are not hitting their potassium needs. So potassium and magnesium are the two minerals that most people, if you're going to like concentrate on which ones most people are not getting enough of, it's those two. However, when you're marketing it to like adult athletes who are sweating and like cutting weight and doing intensive competition as like the right rehydration formula of professional sports and like football clubs and UFC fighters, like that's where it's like such a misalignment of utility, because it's like,
I guess I see it more so as like a sweet water replacement. Like when I see prime, I don't think of, endurance athletes. I'm just thinking, oh, there's someone who's going to pick this up because they like the taste of it.
I think that's what they love people to think, though, is that they get the upside of like aligning with top athletes in sports that they want to be respected in, but also get the sales velocity from like the actual children who buy the stuff. So it's like this weird paradoxical marketing misalignment where it's like all of their sponsored people are like adults at performing at a high level in sport that would never drink this. But then all of their customers are like little kids. It's really weird.
Do you know the breakdown of their customers? If it's actually kids or if it's more adults that are buying this? I'd be very curious to see.
Yeah, I think the demo is mostly kids. And that's with data that I've been given from like retail stores too, being somebody who like sells retail stuff.
And how do they differentiate between an adult buying it for their child versus someone under the age of 18 buying it?
That's a good question. As far as like actually getting hyper specific on how they would calculate these things or like gender or anything of that nature, I don't know how they do it. I just know that like when I see their audience as well, given the anecdotes I've been given in the retail space, given the audiences I see show up to their events when they do the events for Prime, given like all of the circumstantial evidence that is provided, it looks to be dominated by young children. All of the anecdotes about, you know, like super thrilled customers, even the thing he used as proof that his product's great when he called me a virgin was like some little kid. So it's like, there's not a lot of people emailing in like, I'm, you know, an athlete in sport, and this was the thing that was game changing for me. Not that it needs to be, but it's just like, I think proportionally more kids are buying it. I think adults drink it because it tastes good too.
Why don't you create something that would be a competition to that?
I have electrolyte formula, but it's not like geared to their demographic. So yeah. And I just am like not that pushy about it. So like, I actually talked about it at the end of the 3-hour video, but it was very brief.
Got it.
Yeah. But in general, again, it's like 2 use cases. Are you trying to have something that tastes good and is widely adopted and people slam all day? That might make sense if you're trying to just like drink something that tastes good. It's like, yeah, like you said, it could be like a Mio or like a water replacement sort of thing.
Right.
That said, it has potassium, so you could actually give a misleading representation of it, like this has electrolytes, because it does. It's not inaccurate to say. It's just not the thing that you're primarily sweating out when you're exercising, and yet you're marketing it through guys who are literally weight cutting for the UFC.
Yeah, it could be a good soda alternative, or if you're going to have like a Fanta,
maybe,
you know,
I think
loaded
it's
with
low
sugar.
calorie as well.
It is. I think it's like 10 or 20 something calories, 15 calories.
the way they
somewhere in
market,
there.
like if they represented it in a fair way, I would be far less scrutinous of it. It's like the problem I have too is like I've made videos reviewing company stuff, and like that's part of the content I made back in the day was like supplement reviews and stuff like that. And like there's a way to do it that is like a more fair representation of what you're seeing versus when him and KSI will compare their product to others. Even the other day, they posted their energy drink beside a Red Bull, and they were like, Prime Energy has 10 calories. Red Bull has 160. You would need to drink a Prime Energy this big to get the same amount of calories as a Red Bull. And KSI's like, what? And it's this giant drink. And it's like they completely intentionally overlook saying that Red Bull sugar-free is, I think, less calories per can than theirs, and is the exact same makeup otherwise, other than being artificially sweetened and 0 calorie. So like to basically assert that this is their representation of product, they have a variant that is what would be competitive with yours. So why are you completely overlooking it entirely?
Are there any illegalities of putting your product next to somebody else's and saying ours is better without giving a full fair comparison in that case?
I'm sure if they haven't been sued yet, I would assume no, because they've been doing it a lot.
It just seems like even Mr. Beast is very careful about how he positions Mr. Beast bars against Hershey's.
Yeah, like
rarely ever says anything directly. It's usually, which one do you like better? Mr. Beast wins over Hershey, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing that's really odd, man, because it's like Gatorade. They have how many different types of Gatorade? Like 6 or 7 different variants, and they all have different use cases. One of them is Gatorade Zero, which has almost no calories and just tastes good and is like a reasonable electrolyte formula. And yet Logan will pick the one that has a ton of sugar in it and is meant to be used in like very specific use cases in sport, and then compare it to Prime, which is meant to be drank like in children who aren't even exercising essentially. Be like, ours has 10 calories. Theirs has, look at this much sugar. This is how much sugar it is. You like pour it out in front of you. It's like, dude, like, I don't know. It just screams unethical marketing to me. It's just not, there's ways you could highlight the utility of your product that don't involve like misrepresenting your competition so blatantly. And it's like the people that buy into it must be kids, because it's like you're literally marketing to the lowest common denominator of like understanding of what you're putting in front of their face. It's like, oh, more sugar, bad, less sugar.
In fairness, I think most people are like that. Not just kids.
Maybe,
like I think
but
most
it's like
adults would see sugar and no sugar and just automatically.
But an
think
adult
no sugar's
going to the
better.
grocery store, would they? I guess maybe they wouldn't look for, like, they wouldn't even know the Gatorade product exists because they heard Logan Paul say that Gatorade equals bad. At which point, it's questionable as to like, are you basically just misrepresenting this other brand's offering? Because you're making it seem like their entire catalog revolves around this sugar dense, like unhealthy thing, and yours is so dramatically better and completely like steering people away from the products that they would actually buy from that company should they know the truth. So
Yeah, I know for me, it's so silly, but when I was a kid, and maybe I was like 12, 11 years old, I went to the doctor's office and they had this thing on the wall that showed like, a chocolate bar, a can of soda, like all these things.
Yeah.
And above it was the amount of sugar it had in it, in sugar cubes.
Yeah.
And when I saw the can of soda and the amount of sugar that was in it in cube form, that turned me off from drinking soda as a kid. So I could see if you have this drink here and you pour out the sugar, it's alarming to see how much sugar is put in foods and drinks today.
that's true. I think the thing they lean on though heavily is the fact that these companies are so much bigger. It's similar to like a YouTuber doing a takedown video on you and you trying to decide, should I respond to this or should I not? Is it worth like giving them a platform? Is what they said even valid? You consider all these things. I'm sure Gatorade and these other companies have considered like, this is complete nonsense. Like, do we do anything? I guess we can't because it's like this company.
If they respond, then they're bringing a lot of attention. They can't respond.
Exactly. So like, I think they know this and they lean into it because when you don't hear any pushback, a lot of people will blindly believe it.
Yeah.
And then who's actually watching the adults on YouTube who are dismantling the videos and whatnot? Probably not little kids. Like my demographic, I can almost guarantee is older than Logan's.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's wild, dude. And it's like I've never seen somebody so committed to making as much money as possible, even to the detriment of long-term brand credibility. Like the guy often is synonymous with scammer now, and he doesn't even seem to care. Like I've seen some wild stuff that he's put out there to monetize off his audience, even to the extent of putting like, I wasn't even aware he did another like NFT thing behind a paywall for his members of his membership site. So imagine.
Was that 99 Originals?
No, he's done multiple apparently. So he's done like 99 Originals, Crypto Zoo, and then there was like a bunch of others I wasn't even aware he did. But there was this one, and I think it's pretty egregious that you would do this to your most diehard people, is you paid for a paywall to get exclusive content because you're such a fan of this guy, and he doesn't even really post there apparently. And then once you're behind there, you get pitched an NFT that you only have access to because you're like one of the most committed fans, and then you get rug pulled on that. Like, holy shit, dude. Like, talk about slapping your audience in the face.
What's interesting is I remember when he was doing the Pokemon box breaks, the second one he did, he included an NFT, or he sold NFTs of the hollows he pulled.
Yes, like what?
And at the peak, those NFTs, they all sold out the first day, but a lot of them were selling for over $40,000.
Yeah,
$40,000 for an NFT of him pulling a Charizard card.
Yeah.
I'm so curious what those would sell for today.
Nothing. I've seen the values. Like nothing. They've actually crashed to nothingness. Like there's been assessments of this that check the before and afters and like what happened to those projects, and they're all worthless. And he will never talk about it. Dink Doink Coin or whatever. Like all that shit.
I always assumed that was a joke, though.
Dude.
I never.
Yeah, but you did, but a lot of other
I
people
don't think
didn't.
anybody is taking that serious. I could be wrong, but like I don't
He's
think anyone
talked
look
about
at
it
Dink Doink and.
Well, people know that it's a nonsense thing that's not meant to be a real business in general, but it's the fact that he's like, I'm putting my money into this and it's stupid, but it'll probably gain value because shit coins are blowing up right now. And I think it's has good potential. Like you've endorsed it to your audience. There's no way you thought all those crypto projects were going to go to the moon and like, it's all going to be fine. And then not be apologetic afterwards for how they've all crashed into nothingness, sweep it all under the rug, try and like threaten CoffeeZilla to sue him. And then when he actually doesn't back down, all of a sudden now you're like, you care about everyone. Yeah, man. Like it's wild because it's like, it almost reinforces just doing whatever you need to get ahead. Like it's wild. Like it's not a good story necessarily for takeaways of motivation, in my opinion. Like every time you can monetize off your audience, milk the shit out of them. It's like what he's done, and it's worked quite well, at least from a monetary perspective. So I don't know. I feel like at some point it's like there's going to be such an overwhelmingly negative perspective of what he's doing that maybe it muddles out the rest, but he's also done an exceptional job of being viral in moments that also mute out those situations seemingly. Like replace the audience with kids who don't know about it and just keep recycling it.
Yeah. There's going to be some random YouTube channel with like 30,000 subscribers that makes like a 6-hour expose video on.
I think that's the one
Logan,
I just saw one the other day, and it like literally made a chronological timeline of every scam he's done.
Oh, actually.
Yeah. I don't know how viral it is
Oh,
right now.
I think I've seen that. Yeah, I think it was the channel King of Nothing.
Yeah.
Oh, King of Nothing.
Right?
I've seen him before.
I think that was it was a long
Yeah.
video.
He had a lot of stuff that I didn't even know existed. Yeah. And it was like, oh man, this guy has done like I don't know. I'd probably be misquoting, but it was like 5+ rug pulls or something, or like crypto hype situations that you knew were nonsense, like things that weren't valid businesses that you had no idea what was going on. And all you cared about was hyping it up so you could make something off of it, hopefully. So yeah, dude, it's like, I don't know, like there's examples of people doing it the right way and then there's people doing it the wrong way. And I think he's an example of the wrong way personally. Like, I don't think it's, admirable that he has this, $1 billion prime. Like, yeah, man, congrats. But like at the expense of what?
Do you think he's on gear?
Maybe, certainly possible. I think that he has great genetics for sure. So I think it's plausible he could be natural, but the drug testing parameters of the last fight were pretty suspect. I think it was like testing at competition only, for example. And yeah, like with the type of training he's doing, boxing, he's still like gaining size seemingly. I don't know. Like it's a toss up for sure. I would say I could go either way. So I wouldn't definitively say I know for sure.
How are peptides different?
Basically, steroids bind to a certain receptor called the androgen receptor. It was the thing I talked about where how you respond to hormones could dictate, how much you respond regardless of how much is present. With peptides, they are typically more rehabilitation oriented and more like pro recovery. They do a lot of different things because you could find examples of peptides that literally, I don't know if you guys have heard of melanotan 2 before.
No.
Dude, if you pull this up, you will find some wild, people are about to be like mind blown if they've never heard of it. You can literally inject this stuff, stimulate the production of melanin in somebody who literally cannot tan at all, even an albino person, and make them black if you want to.
What?
Yeah. So there's some people who change their race manually with this peptide.
So you could do it for like 6 months.
Yeah. And
then change back.
Yeah. There was some woman I made a video on who not only made herself black, but then went on like national news and was asserting she is like actually African American and had like was always like that or something. So she was actually asserting her like that was her background too. And yeah, a lot of people use it to stay tan year round, and it's pretty good at it.
Is there any negative side effects? I'm really pale.
That's
I would love to get a little bit more color on my skin.
It was never FDA approved, so you have to buy it on the underground essentially, and it will. One of the negatives is it like flushes your skin for like an hour, so you get like a really red face, which is kind of unsightly. It'll also raise your heart like a little bit, seemingly, but you could also get moles and freckles in areas that maybe you didn't want them.
Permanently?
It seems to kind of go away when your tan goes away too. One of the side effects, interestingly enough, is spontaneous erections. So people get it. They actually, the developers of the drug realized it was doing that, and they like pulled out the like, I don't know, aphrodisiac / like sexual enhancing characteristics of it and made a female libido drug out of it. And it's actually FDA approved for female, like lack of female libido.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So this drug exists. It's called Vyleesi, I believe. And you can get it prescribed as a woman for low drive. And yeah, it doesn't tan you as much, but it just makes you hornier. There's some other ones. There's a lot of other ones that all do varying things, like ones that enhance tissue repair, for example, and are like pro like blood vessel formation. Could help get like actual circulation to areas and injuries that otherwise would have been like pretty difficult to get blood flow to. There's an array of different ones.
It's amazing they have the technology to do something like that.
Yeah. There's
to me, it seems like magic.
There's this one called GHRP6, and it stimulates the receptor that makes you hungry. So you could use it and literally like crush an eating competition.
But what about physical limitations like your stomach size?
Even if you're not hungry, it will make you hungry. Like it overrides signals.
Gotta do that before all you can eat sushi. That's what we gotta do.
Horrible. I don't
away like $300 worth of sushi.
What situations would you want to just be perpetually hungry? Or like,
well,
why?
That's the thing. It's not perpetual. You can like it's in and out of your system relatively quickly. So you could.
I know, but to overeat like that, you would think that your stomach might eventually burst. Or like there's not risks to that.
At some point, like you get full, but it enhances your capacity to like override satiation mechanism essentially. So
awful to me.
With bodybuilders though, a lot of times the bottleneck of gaining size is food intake. So for them, it's worthwhile potentially. For you, not so much. For you, maybe. I don't know. Sounds like it might be. But like back in the day too, people were doing I almost did this. I'm glad I didn't. But 10,000 calorie eating challenges were really big in fitness YouTube back in the day. I was like, everyone's getting, this is before I had a big channel. I was like, everyone's getting viral videos off 10,000 calorie challenge. I'm going to do the 10,000 calorie in one meal challenge, like in less than an hour. And I was going to do it, and I decided not to. But that was what I would have used if I wanted to do it.
So this sounds stupid, okay?
Yeah.
3,500 calories is 1 pound of fat.
Yep.
If you eat 10,000 calories, does that, and your baseline, let's just say, is 2,000, does that automatically mean that you're going to gain almost 3 pounds? Or, 2 pounds?
I would be...
Like, is there a limit to how many calories your body could absorb in a day?
Probably. I would think there'd be some level of, like, malabsorption happening. I don't know to what degree. That's a really interesting question, though.
Maybe that's a hack. It's like you have to eat 15,000 calories in a day, and those last 10,000 calories just don't count.
And then, like, don't eat the rest of the week.
Yeah, basically.
That's wildly enough, and this shows how bad the eating habits are in the fitness industry. Is one of the ways that I used to eat, and a lot of people still eat, is you have perfect discipline from Monday to Saturday, or whatever days you decide, and then on the 7th day you just go ham and you just eat whatever. If you're actually really lean and dieted down, it's pretty easy to crush like 10,000 calories of just anything. And after that, you've kind of like made yourself sick to the point that food isn't that appealing. And the next 3 days or so, you kind of get back to what you were at, and then you start making progress again. And it's kind of this cycle of, binging and then depriving yourself and binging, and it's not sustainable. So that's where I wouldn't recommend that.
Gosh. What about the Liver King diet?
The one that he doesn't even follow himself because he has a different one.
How do you get access to all this information?
He tried to hire me as a coach before he was online. So like he sent me some like pretty like damning information from his official company email, and I didn't realize it at the time. And then he like went on to basically abuse hormones and compounds to build a bigger than life like social media presence. And obviously he got big very fast. And then previous to that, anyone who knew what he was actually doing and lying about had that information, and he just didn't think it was a risk or risky enough, I guess.
Why did you decide to make that information public? And what was going through your mind at the time? Yeah,
so with him, it was kind of interesting because I didn't even know I had it for a while. I was just kind of like, I made speculative videos on it because he's basically telling people he's natural. I'm like, there's no fucking way this guy's natural. So I'd made a couple of videos just objectively looking at what I could tell and giving my opinion. And I just saw him going on a rampage of lying on podcasts to people's faces. And it even got to the extent where he was telling people that you're like subprimal if you're on hormones, like you're like a lesser man essentially, which there's a lot of people that literally need them to thrive or function. He was saying things like, you're pathetic if you think I am. That just shows how bad of work ethic you have. How could you not think this is achievable? If I actually took steroids, then you'd see what it would look like. Maybe I will, just to shut you idiots up. Just like wild stuff. And I was like, dude. And then the monetary upside was kind of hard to ignore, that he was asserting that what he was doing was so conducive to his progress and whatnot that it's not like he attributed that you could get his physique to his diet or his supplements, but it was like, that was the takeaway a lot of people were getting, is like, you're ancestrally consistent. He was like telling Hassan on H3 podcast, like, you shouldn't take TRT, just do the ancestral disciplines and then you will be able to double your testosterone levels like I have. You know, like a lot of his message is noble in practice, and overall the takeaways are good, but it was getting to the extent where he was actually very clearly biased in order to promote it in such a way that he was doing everything ancestrally consistent and it equals the outcome he has, when in reality he was lying and taking hormones to achieve it. And, you know, like, there's a myriad of ethical complications that come into your own judgment if it's like fair or not. So for me, it was kind of like sick of seeing this guy just like going on a rampage on social media. I was like, you know what? Like, you're not going to tell the truth, so I'll tell it for you.
Would there be a situation where you would reach out to him first and say, hey, I have this information.
Well, the thing is, he knew I had it. Because he sent it to me.
Maybe he forgot.
I mean, dude, he knew. I guess he just like.
But wouldn't you go to him first and say, hey, I got this information. You know I have it. I want to make this video because you're making these claims. I'll give you the opportunity to say it first from your channel. And if you don't, then I will make my video. But I'd like you to have the opportunity. Did that ever cross your mind, or was that ever an option? Or
Yeah, like I suppose that is something that could have been done, but I felt like he had more than enough opportunity. He'd been presented with the question a zillion times and basically spit in people's faces when he asked it. And there was a point when he was also like not responding to me on social media. And I was like, I don't really care to engage with the guy necessarily. So, you know, I just didn't see it worthwhile at the time too. So the guy's going to continue to lie, like to my friends' faces too. Like he'd go on podcasts with people I respect and I'm friends with and just be like, you know, dodgy, lying, saying complete misrepresentations of what he's doing. And I don't know, especially like the you know, saying you don't need blood work too. And like you're subprimal if you think you know, I should have blood work and cholesterol levels are like he was just saying a lot of nonsense and it was like over the top to where, I don't know, like I felt like he had 2 years to come clean or whatever it was. And he just wasn't going to do it. And he was leaning harder and harder into it. And I was like, yeah, man, like, you know, I have this too. Like you sent it to me. So obviously you either think I'm like too scared to come out with it or like don't care if I do or I don't know, don't think I'm going to.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like,
Did you get any backlash from that video?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
And what was the criticism you got on that?
Well, similar to the, you know, ethical conundrum you just presented. It's like, how do you like, you know, make sense of making that versus opposite other options? And yeah, it's certainly an interesting question, but yeah, it was, I think ultimately people were just happy to see the truth come out and then him finally admit it and then see how he responded to it and then what he would say. Because all of a sudden after that point, he's like, I think that hormones have a viable, you know, are viable for people who need them. And I'm going to, you know, try and go natural. And then he ends up going back on hormones again. He's self-admittedly on hormones again now.
So what happened when he went off of steroids?
Who knows if he did, dude? He said he did. I didn't see any blood work proof. So I don't know. Maybe he tried. And I'm sure that the biggest thing he probably had a hurdle getting over is the fact that even if you come off, if you've like subjected yourself to this level of exposure for however long, there's no guarantee you're going to like get back to high functioning status naturally necessarily, even if everything's perfect. So it almost begs the question, like how impactful is this ancestral living that is supposedly so optimal for everything and correcting hormones when you yourself, with every like avenue and means and resources of an ancestrally consistent person, can't even restore your hormones after coming off? Like it doesn't look too good. So I'm sure there was like a lot of different, you know, thoughts that went into like how he should handle it. What should he do? What should I say I'm doing? Should I say I'm coming off when I'm probably planning on just staying on? Like, what am I going to do about it? So I don't know. And like, ultimately he's the only one who knows for sure what he did. But to me and objectively, everyone else kind of watching, doesn't look like he really changed a whole lot in recent. I'm sure he like isn't abusing the hell out of some of the growth hormone dosages he was now, but some of it is, yeah, man, I don't know. Like he was definitely lying to everyone and now the truth's out and he's handled it as well as he could, I guess.
Yeah. Is there anything left that you haven't said to him that you want to say?
Not really, dude.
No?
No. He like asked me to be in some documentary thing and I was like I don't really see the point personally. Like I think we've kind of like beat this horse to death and people know, and like you've said that I don't necessarily think he's coming from the best place of like I don't trust him necessarily. So I'm very hesitant to like be like, you know, you have the best intentions with whatever you're doing at this point forward, so I should just associate with you. Like certainly not my thought process. So yeah, it's interesting to see what he's doing though, because again, like I think his overall message is noble. You know, some of the stuff that he's seen with his kids getting better from autoimmune issues, like that's real stuff that is worth taking note of. And it sucks that it may be overshadowed by this thing, but like it was kind of his brought it upon himself to kind of like commingle the two. You could have easily been like, yeah, like I'm on hormone replacement therapy, but like these are the lifestyle practices I utilize and I think even people who are natural should utilize to optimize health, and here's why. And like Paul Saladino, he's huge now and he does not, you know, have to lean into some fake natural physique and like lie to his fans or anything about it. So I'm not saying he's like perfect either, because he definitely makes some pretty like, you know, aggressive claims sometimes about like vegetables and whatnot, but like he's certainly not lying about being on like $20,000 of gear to his audience and then selling the product. So yeah.
It's really interesting because I look at Paul Saladino's diet and it seems so counterintuitive and so anti-food pyramid, which I know is kind of people will say it's a scam. Everything's a scam. The food pyramid's a scam. But I tried Paul Saladino's diet.
Which diet though? Because he's changed his stance.
I would say it's the more recent one. So I went out, I bought raw honey. I bought non-pasteurized like milk, cheese. I just did 80-20 ground beef. I bought beef tallow. Grass-fed, grass-finished ground beef, which is key. I bought beef tallow. I did the whole 9 yards. Yeah. And I would eat like 2 meat patties with the non-pasteurized dairy and then put a glob of raw honey on it. Yeah. And maybe a organic banana on the side.
Sure.
And it was really good. But as I'm eating it, I'm thinking to myself, there's no way that this is healthy. You know what I mean? Like he says he's an MD. Yep. Right. And he says it's super healthy. And I had that meal day after day after day after day.
Yeah.
And there's just no way, if I'm looking at that plate, that it's healthy.
Yeah, dude. It's interesting for sure, because I think, again, similar to what we talked about how if you're in a deficit, it doesn't matter what you're eating. Like you can lose weight eating garbage. Not that I'm saying what he's doing is garbage, but you can lose weight essentially eating anything. It's just how you lose the weight and what it results in from like a signaling aspect, a muscle retention standpoint, cognitive health. Like some of these things will vary, but you will reliably lose weight regardless of what you're eating. If it's McDonald's, if it's burgers, whatever on it, etc. So with him, a lot of the upside, I would say, is ultimately that his energy balance is good regardless. So as long as you're in like a sustainable model where you're not overeating, like that's the majority of your benefit from the low-hanging fruit stuff. So like he is surfing daily, he's exercising regularly, he's metabolically fit, and he's doing things to sustain it. It's not just like he's eating what would be considered perfectly. He's also not overeating it. So to actually say, oh, is this, the sugar and stuff good with the meat? Like it very much depends on what you're doing activity-wise. Like if you're just sedentary, I'm sure he would not be telling you like slam a bunch of, honey and sugar and this and that too. Like it very much depends on what you are exposing yourself to. But again, I'm not like a nutrition expert. I don't claim to be. I certainly don't like that field either. There's a lot of like dogma and like controversial takes in it. And I think that he does potentially downplay the importance of certain lipid parameters that are like pretty reliably shown to be atherosclerosis concerning for sure. And his assertion is that if you're metabolically healthy, it doesn't really matter what your LDL cholesterol is or these numbers. And it's like resulted in endless debates between him and like Lane Norton, who responds to his stuff and just like dunks on him constantly. And then people who are on his side and who say how great they feel too, which is a real thing. That's not to say that's not real. But to say what's optimal versus not, it like depends on your genetics, depends on your blood work, depends on how you respond to the food itself. And yeah, like a lot of the stuff he eats, it's on the basis of it being nutrient rich and bioavailable and unlikely to cause autoimmune issues. And like, it's hard to argue with that logic when you just stop there. It's when you get above and beyond that, like, okay, is this much sugar good for what I'm doing? Is it sustainable? How difficult is it to even procure these things? Because a lot of people are like, I'm sure you had like a pretty arduous process.
Very hard and to find beef tallow.
And relatively expensive.
It was very expensive.
Yeah.
How much was it?
It probably, 80-20 grass-fed, grass-finished ground beef is about twice as expensive per pound as just like any other type. Sure. And everything else is basically 2 to 2.5 times more expensive. And I had to go to Sprouts. You can't go to like Albertsons or Ralph's or something like that.
No, I absolutely don't want the takeaway from that to be don't eat good because it's expensive. Because like I think if anything you should spend good money on, it's food.
I agree.
However, I think a lot of what he says has validity, but I also think he leans a little bit too in the fearmonger side of diet, and he will extrapolate out from like rodent literature stuff that might not actually be super applicable to humans, and then say, see, like, soy fucked up this rat, so don't like ever eat this or whatever. Like, and then he kind of like invites scrutiny by trying to like seemingly have like a bit of a, myopic view around trying to like, it's kind of like, it's not Liver King at all, but like he's definitely leaning to the viral angle a bit, which I don't think he needs to. He's a super intelligent guy who people respect his opinion. He doesn't need to do that kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, his diet model works for him. It works great, seemingly. He gets regular imaging to make sure he doesn't have atherosclerosis accumulating. At least that's what he says. And, I don't know. Like if you're hitting your micronutrients and your macros, you're not gaining weight and you like it, Like, I guess part of the hang up is, do you even like this food? Because a lot of people are just not going to like that stuff. I tried his like raw milk, like honey concoction the other day.
You tried that?
Yeah, he made one for me. I fucking hated it.
I actually didn't mind it. Raw milk and non-pasteurized honey.
But that's just like, so is it realistic for me to eat? Like, that's a lot of calories too, the raw milk, presumably.
Yeah.
Plus the honey, which is like a sugar bomb, essentially.
Yeah.
Is the most satiating thing I could be allocating like 400 or whatever calories to this like drink? Probably not, dude. So I'm not going to argue with the validity of its micronutrient density and the quality of the food, but like perhaps it's not the most conducive thing to like my ideal diet. So I don't think everyone should copy what he does. I don't think he would assert in like a long form podcast either that everyone should copy him to the money either.
He said that before. He says everybody responds differently.
Yeah.
And he thinks as a general rule of thumb, like broad strokes, that this is a pretty good diet for most people.
I think in general, if you choose from the food groups that he has asserted as good quality stuff, like it's hard to go wrong, pending that you're also doing other things right. Because a lot of people don't exercise, they don't sleep well, and they don't do these other things. So the real argument comes into the propensity to atherosclerosis and if you can avoid it entirely just by being metabolically fit, which is super questionable, but he will tell you pretty aggressively, if you are metabolically healthy, like don't worry about it. If you follow this diet, exercise, etc., like that's where it gets really finicky because there are people that seemingly end up with clogged arteries regardless of how metabolically fit they are. And then he'll assert that data is nonsense. And then it's like this endless argument where you're not able to like prove one way or the other. But from what I've seen, I think you should be a bit cautious with. I think there's absolutely a balanced take where don't just blindly assume that you're going to be covered because you're eating a carnivore diet.
We should have Paul on the podcast.
I'd be down.
It would make a really
absolutely.
interesting. We could even go to him. He's in Puerto Rico, right, or something like that.
Yeah. He was just. I don't know when he's gonna be traveling next because I know he was just in Arizona and then he was just in Austin to meet up with me and then now he's in Puerto Rico or Costa Rica.
Costa Rica is that it?
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm sure he'd be down, man. Like, yeah, you guys
Could be a fun trip. Honestly.
I would love to go to Costa Rica. That would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like most people's diets are just so bad. So if you take his diet,
Anything is an improvement.
yeah, it's just going to be better than, eating Doritos chips every day.
I think what a lot of the thing, because again, I'm not, a nutrition content creator necessarily. So I don't have like extreme bias towards one way or the other. I just want to eat what makes me feel the best, perform the best, and the least chance of dying. Like that is essentially what I care about. So whatever gets me there, like I don't really care what it is, as long as I like it too and it's sustainable and I'm not going to overeat and get fat on it. With them though, they get like really granular about like proving each other are insane almost to the point that it's like, it's hard to really like realize that a lot of the intelligent people on both sides of the camps are saying a lot of the same things and they act like it's totally different. Like just because Paul said don't eat oatmeal, it doesn't mean this other guy is saying don't eat red meat or something. Like a lot of people assert that it's like vegetarian versus carnivore, but oftentimes the people that Paul is actually arguing with, at least from like the educated side of this equation, are people who are like actually eating red meat regularly and have high quality, steaks on a daily basis and are doing the right lifestyle practices and this and that. There's just the one disagreement that I see that has not been fully fleshed out where like everyone's in agreement on is how problematic is it to have elevated atherogenic lipoproteins, which is essentially like your cholesterol profile. Like at a granular level, is there a possibility to end up with heart disease even if you're eating the perfect animal-based, carnivore-based diet with the surfing, with the everything? And this is assuming that it's in a regular person too, because obviously not everyone is Paul with the perfect lifestyle and all the resources to get like insanely high quality food and like whatever. So considerations have to be made, and it was perhaps a super long ramble, but like I think what he says has validity for sure. And I think a lot of the food choices he has are, questionably sustainable for some people and questionably affordable, but also like, they're still high quality. There's no arguing there.
I loved the diet. It's like my favorite foods to eat, believe it or not. Like honey, globs of honey on top of raw meat, or not raw meat. But on top of like 80-20 ground beef is like, it's incredible.
Yeah.
But it just looks like it's just, I'm just
It looks like dog
injecting.
shit.
It looks like I'm injecting my arteries with like cholesterol when I'm doing that.
It looks like if you saw a picture at the doctor's office of like what not to
Yeah,
eat
what not to
almost.
eat. It's that. But I'm like, I feel good, but it just, everyone that would see it would be like, what are you eating?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, totally understandable. I can see why people would think that too.
Do you take creatine?
Yes. And I would highly recommend it for almost everyone, even women. And there is new literature emerging on how impactful it is on brain health, fertility metrics, and other things aside from just muscle.
Now this makes me want to make another comment because I started taking creatine. Now I play pickleball. I play recreationally, but I'm very serious. When I went and I started taking creatine, I noticed I got a lot heavier. And I just felt heavy on my feet. And I checked it with my other friend who skateboards. And he's like, yeah, I could ollie like 6 inches lower. That was like my max ollie height when I was taking creatine because you just get so heavy so quickly. And you feel slower and bogged down. And your arms, yeah, sure, they get bigger and you feel stronger and you can push more weight in the gym. But it just slows you down.
So one thing you have to consider too is in sports, when you go watch an Olympic event or Olympics in general, there is different categories of even like runners. Check the body types of guys in the 100 meter, 200, 400, 800. It's like reliably, you will see a decrease in muscle mass of like double-digit pounds almost. Just because the guy at the 100 meter has more muscle, it doesn't mean he's going to perform as well in an endurance event as the really skinny guy in like the whatever. So to use that as a negative against creatine is certainly not fair. It's like it's not apples to apples where it's like, okay, for skateboarding, where being lighter on your feet proportionally is more advantageous potentially than whatever upside you get out of it. Like, okay, in that circumstance, how important is skateboarding to you relative to whatever benefits you get out of this? Like, if ollieing higher and not getting creatine upside is like, you know, your determination of more useful, then don't take it. So it is pro health as well as pro muscular performance, but in certain contexts, like, yeah, maybe more not harmful, but like less helpful for like specific sports.
Interesting. Okay. So I was concerned that that was like just overall bad for my health. Cause when I feel slower on my feet and I feel like I'm just not as agile, I'm just like, okay, that's just a metric of like, this is something I should stop doing. But I suppose if there's like brain function advantages and other things as well, and then obviously pushing more weight in the gym, looking stronger, feeling stronger, those could outweigh it.
What are your thoughts on AG1?
Yeah, I think that it is, of the available greens formulas, probably the most rigorously, or at least what I'm aware of. Like, I think I've had like 50 plus iterations. They've sponsored my channel before. And I think in general, greens formulas, it's very difficult to get an amount that is even something people would drink into a powder. Because it would be almost disgusting if you were to get like tons of greens into a powder format. So I think the limitation is more on the taste profile as opposed to like the formula's validity. Because I think that the people behind it are really good people who actually like go out of their way to do good sourcing of ingredients, are pretty mindful of like reflecting current literature. Everyone I know and trust speaks very highly of them. Like Huberman speaks very highly of them, Attia, etc. Like these are guys that I defer to for my own education. So if I was to say a greens formula that exists, I would trust them more than most companies. That said, do I think that it's going to replace greens in your diet? No, I think it's a supplement at best. Also, do I think that you're going to get like a super effective amount of every ingredient that's in the formula? Definitely not. There's like, I don't know, dozens of ingredients that are there. Some of them objectively perhaps to like look good on the label, not in impactful amounts. But I think also this is just sort of the standard for the greens industry. So you can only put so much before people won't drink it. And there's definitely some, you know, consideration of that as well. So, you know, if I was to look at greens formulas that exist, from what I'm aware of, they're like one of the better ones.
We had a guest on our podcast, Justin Waller, and he said that when he works out his abs, he only works out the bottom two. What are your thoughts on that?
Why did he say that?
Because you don't see people walking around with only the bottom two abs. Usually the people have the top two or the top four, and a real six-pack of abs needs the bottom two. So if he works out the bottom two, realistically, it's just the top four are going to follow suit.
Did you ask him about spot reduction? Because like I would be wondering, like if I'm trying to develop a balanced core, I am trying to target the whole thing. I don't want to have like a underdeveloped stability in the top four rather than and just the bottom two. Like that's how you would end up with injuries typically. I don't even know how you would really work just the bottom two. Like there's definitely ways to target
We have
it
a
more.
clip that went really viral.
Oh, show him the clip.
Okay,
I don't know if I can. Let me see if I can find it.
There's no. I think it's one of our most viewed YouTube
like
clips.
there's definitely ways to target proportionally more down there, but like.
Okay, right here.
I found it.
16 million views on
Holy.
Instagram. There you go.
That's crazy.
I've had a six-pack since I was 24 years old. When I do abs, I only do the bottom 2 abs. How many guys have you met who's like, oh, I got the top 2? Bro, my fucking grandma's got the top 2. It's your ribs, asshole.
I only have the top 2.
Exactly.
Come on.
Exactly. But if you do decline weighted abs, like with a 45 on your chest, and you only focus on the bottom 2, and you tilt your head back so you isolate it, nobody in history of the universe has ever had the bottom 2 in this V taper and not have the top 2. You ever do a side plank?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Go up and put your hand on them. Make sure it burns, and when it finally starts to burn, bounce. Pulse on that bitch. Fuck it up. Like, I want to destroy it. I used to do that 2 minutes at a time on each side. You kind of get that 300 look. I'm telling you, you'll have a six-pack faster than you would any other way.
I'm gonna try that.
It's an absolute cheat
try
because
it?
it pokes through the skin.
Why?
Because I just,
He wasn't convincing enough?
It's just going in the history of the universe, Jack.
I probably just forgot it.
Okay, so, like, it's, to me, the stuff he says is not, like, inaccurate that when would you see a guy with the bottom 2 and not the top? It's like, well, like, yeah, because that's where fat accumulates, so you probably wouldn't have got abs anywhere if you weren't lean enough. So, like, what he says, it's like, that's true, I guess I wouldn't, but, like, it's, I don't know, like, to me, it's implying there's some sort of, like, localized fat reduction that you could get out of that exercise, or you're going to end up with underdeveloped lower abs relative to the others that is not related to diet whatsoever. So it's like, I do think that that's like a viable exercise. I just don't think it has the importance that he implies. Because at the end of the day, abs are made in the kitchen. I don't think he would deny that. I think didn't he say he eats like once a day or something?
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, like it's his diet that is conducive mostly to the abs. So I would be shocked to see the difference in him having body fat versus not is like the thing that's going to make the biggest difference. If you're training your abs, if you want to hit the lower ones, like I know people who don't train abs at all and have better looking abs than anyone I've ever seen. And they train it indirectly through core stabilizing exercises that are compound movements. I don't necessarily think you like need to do them or don't do them. It could be useful if you want to have like a good core that is proportionally strong to the rest of your body, but doing the exercise to get the abs is like, it's made in the kitchen at the end of the day. So like, I don't think there's any localized fat reduction. I don't think it makes that big of a difference on the development of them where it's going to look way different. Like, I think it's kind of exaggerated. Like, it sounds like something you would hear, like, I don't know. It's like a bro myth sort of thing. Yeah. And not to speak poorly about his advice either. Like, obviously the guy is in good shape and whatever, but it's like, I can almost guarantee like 99% of it comes from his diet. Yeah.
All
right. I don't think there's anything else left.
This is amazing.
Is there anything that you wanted to talk about? Anything you want to bring up?
I don't know. Like, what do you guys spend the majority of your time on now that you feel is worthwhile and the biggest ROI?
For the podcast, it would be travel. Us finding the time to go to our guests.
Let's just say like in your week though.
Yeah.
Like, what do you of all of your trials and tribulations of having multiple channels, reaction videos, doing your like very targeted main channel videos, podcasts, like what do you feel like is the most valuable use of your time now?
Honestly, it's posting less. As weird as that sounds, it's posting less on the main channel. I was posting 3 times a week, and I did that for 6.5 years. And it wasn't until I think 2 months ago, give or take, I started posting once a week. And the views have gone up since I've posted once a week.
Overall.
Okay. Yeah. Doing shorts is fantastic. As far as my own time, I think I'm focusing more time on myself, which I've never done before.
Nice, dude.
Yeah. Like painting the garage was a big one. I spent 3 days painting the garage. I love doing that. I got a blank canvas. I want to do some art. That's so random, but give that a shot.
Nice, dude.
And home improvement stuff. I'm getting really into that. I did my backyard lights in LA. Did it myself, and it's super easy to do. You buy all the equipment online. It's really easy. You don't need like an electrician or. I paid some dude $600, and I just watched how he did it on the side of the house. And I thought I could do that, and I did. Easy.
Nice.
For a fifth of the cost.
When it comes
stuff
to
like that.
Content, like obviously on the surface, you saying less content. Are you proportionally doing more elsewhere that makes you?
No.
Or are you better at like managing your not going insane while you're not working?
No, I'm spending longer on each video, but just because I have more time, not because I'm actually spending more time on the video. It's just it's the work is expanding because I have more time available to me. That's really it. But no, on the videos itself, I got that down to a science. I mean, I know the structure. I know what does well. I know which topics I could talk about. It just flows.
You didn't uptick your output of podcast frequency or anything, though?
We tried. We tried 2 a week for a little bit, and we discovered it didn't work. 1 a week was a sweet spot. I think especially for a 3-hour episode.
Yeah.
People doing that twice a week is just too much. So we could throw in like a midweek every now and then, but we found once a week is the perfect amount, and then we could do shorts in between. So as odd as it seems, I think working less is to our benefit at this point.
How many people do you have on the team now for like editors, people who clip stuff, whatever?
So it's Graham and I as the hosts. We have a producer that does a lot of the editing, talking to brands, stuff like that, just behind the scenes stuff. We just hired him too, so we're kind of training him. We have our short form editor that clips up things for vertical content, TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, and that guy has his own agency. We're just one of his clients. We have an agency that repurposes our content to a Snapchat tile, so we have that, and they also do it for Facebook. So we also that's the same agency there. And then we have a few different random agencies and agents that we work with to source brand deals.
I appreciate the insight, man. Yeah, appreciate you guys having me too.
Thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. I love this. And we'll link to all of your information down below in the description. So anyone who wants to check you out, description.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.